All right, let's rock and roll, gentlemen. We'll kick it off with the gentlemen. And this is the World's Recap Show. Matt Gary, Eric Helms, your boy Six Pack Lapadat, and holy freaking smokes. This is wild. This was a wild, wild world. It's the biggest worlds we'd ever seen. We had it all. We had upsets, we had controversy, we had come from behind wins, we had massive clashes, we had runaway winners, and then we had drama in the background, Eurosport capturing this and putting up for millions of people to watch. It was crazy. This is one of the craziest worlds, and I got very little sleep as per usual. Got home, got sick. It is what it is. Ran myself ragged. But let's tell some stories. We're gonna go division by division recapping this, and then also at the end, I'm gonna start asking some questions, the fellas some questions, and giving my thoughts on it as well. Who was the breakout star?
Mm.
Did this affect somebody's dynasty? Um, what was the biggest upset win? And some other key questions that need to be answered regarding the gentleman, both what we saw and what it means moving forward. And I'm going to get your guys' opinion on it. So we'll save that for the end of the division by division. Let's start from the bottom, like we always do, in the 59 kilo class. And what can you say about Wasker? Um, put on a hell of a show, charismatic lifter representing the US. His goal leading into this, A, was to make Sheffield, and he needed 636.5 kilo total. He needs 630, or he needs 636, but he was going to have to hit 637.5. Missed that goal. But another one of his goals, though, that he definitely hit, win the world title and bring eyeballs and attention to it. He's different. His personality is different. The way he carries himself is different. The way he talks on podcasts is different. And he's trying to do in the 59s what Penna did in the 66s. It took Penna a little bit. It didn't happen overnight. But Wasker's on his way. And if Wasker ends up going to Sheffield next year, he'll be well on his way. Turned into a bit of the Wasker show here, although Ivan Campano rebounding nicely at this IPF Worlds, going 9 for 9, shocking some people. Ended up with a 602.5 kilo total, taking the silver medal. And longtime veteran of the game, Franklin Leon, in and out of equipment, 40 years old, a master lifter, going 597.5 with the bronze medal. And defending world champion Antoine Garcia from France put on a good show himself, and ending with an 587.5, ending off the podium. Face some adversity there. He went 3 for 3, 6 for 6, but at the very end, while trying to pull himself onto the podium, missing, and then ending off in fourth place. But this was a competitive 59 kilo class, a world class, and these guys all had titles, medals, etc. on their resume. Eric, what was your impression of this? What are you thinking about Wasker, the star power he brings, and the future of the 59s after watching this?
Yeah, I really like Wasker, and that has been the case ever since he came on and did his podcast episode with you on King of the Lifts. And to me, I think the way I see it as a spectator is that I want to see someone who can come in and approach the same heights that Sergey Fedosenko did in that class, just to see that it is a more built out division. And I think he's right on the cusp of it. So for those who don't know, Russia as a country recently not participating. Sergey actually did have a ban back in the day, but so a bit of a tainted record. Some people might look around that, but ultimately it is what it is. And Sergey, when he wins worlds, like if you go back to he's won more worlds than anybody else on the men's side, if I recall correctly, or close to it. And his total that typically wins worlds is between 630 to 660. And he generally does it unopposed. He's probably not at a limit lift on some of those. And seeing Wasker in a position where if he got his last pull and he was in the 630s, that was exciting because it's in the same ballpark as Sergey Fedosenko, and showing that it can be done. There's more than one Terminator out there, and Wasker is young. It's early, and he put himself in a position. He did a great job to where no one could contest his gold medal position. He was 6 for 6 going into the deadlift off subtotal, got his first 2 deadlifts, And what he needed what he was pulling for was 637.5, which was what he could hit without a chip to qualify for Sheffield. Put 272 on there, and it just wasn't there on the day. But I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination to say it won't be there in the future. And that if he had, just put a little bit less on the bar, we're looking at a number that would be not unexpected for Sergey, which I think is something he should be really proud of, because for example, in Sweden, Sergey won with 635. Just as an example. So we're certainly in the same ballpark, and it's just really good to see that happening. And it's an indication that even kind of on the edges of the distribution of body weights, the lesser populated weight classes, the very lights and the very heavy ones, that the swell in participation in powerlifting is getting to the point where, we may not be seeing these very, very clear dynasties, even in those smaller populated classes. Or at least that there's more competitiveness, which is exciting.
Matt, what are your thoughts on the 59s?
Yeah, I would concur with Eric. I mean, I think Eric touched on all the major points. I mean, I think one of the things we have to ask ourselves is how many people come to their first IPF World Championships and win in the first year, the first time out. So this guy, Wasker, man, he checks all the boxes. He does everything right. He's on the details. He's aligned himself with a good coach in Steve Denovi. They put together a good plan. I mean, he had a fantastic performance at PA Nationals, and we were expecting, a slight uptick in performance, but weren't sure how he would carry himself internationally. And he just went out and show improved. And he was one deadlift away from hitting that magic 637.5. He had a 272.5 deadlift in his grasp. And I think, according to some things that I've heard, he just didn't quite set his grip perfectly the way that he normally does. And that was kind of what happened and why he wasn't able to complete the lift. But still, with a 625 kilo total, you're looking at the third best total in this weight class of all time. And that speaks volumes. So the fact that he wasn't able to accumulate that total, still, I think, look, I don't know how things are going to flesh out in terms of wild cards and all that sort of thing. And, there's going to be arguments and people pushing for other people who might have been 95% and above of the world record, in second place and that sort of thing. But without a doubt, this kid came in and Waskar made a statement and he executed like a professional. He handled himself with class. And I just think everything is looking up. His arrow is pointing up in the biggest of ways, and it was exciting to see.
Gentlemen, to make the 59 kilo class rise to the next level, do we need Fedo to come back and these gentlemen clash? Wasker will have another year on him in terms of improvement, and Fedo, who's pushing 40 years old, master lifter, has another year of getting beat up. If they clash at IPF Worlds with Sheffield on the line, what would that do to the 59s? Is that what we need with the winner? Well, more than likely, not Fedo with the ban previously, but knowing that if Wasker defeats Fedo in everything that Wasker brings, and he's a charismatic guy, heads to Sheffield based off of that. Now are we talking people are getting more excited for 59s? I can't remember the last time people talked about a showdown in the 59s. What do you think, Eric?
I don't know that we need it. And the reason I say that, there was actually a really good post on Instagram for those who aren't following Bryce Lewis. And this connects back to our Eros conversation where we had that episode recently, Ryan, is that the age of the people winning is going down. It's getting younger, which is really interesting. And I think, again, speaks to what we talked about. And so long as some of these people have longevity, and to Matt's point, this is Wasker's first time at Worlds, so his trajectory, I would expect to still be up if I had to predict it, But there are a number of people, if you just look at the score sheet in the, say, the top four, who are all clustering around each other. Leon Franklin is really the only person who's like a veteran, everyone else is born in the 90s or born in the 2000s. So I think these numbers are going to go up, and we're going to see more impressive numbers. I don't think Sergey is going to be able to stay much longer. It's like, oh man, that guy was untouchable. I mean, he is. He's like, he deserves that recognition. But I think we're going to see a lot of numbers trajectorying trajectoring. Is that a verb? That's
you bet
not.
it is.
Yeah, now it is. Add it to Scrabble. I said it. No. So projecting into the mid 600s. So I think, like, if I was to get out my crystal ball, which based upon the fantasy league results maybe is a little murkier than I previously thought, and predict, say, World 2025, I think we've got 3 people in the 600s, and I think we're going to have, and that's really all it takes. Like, as we're going to get into the 66s, you just get a weight class that is previously not very well watched, and you get a bunch of people together who are clustering around the same number, pushing the envelope of what we thought was possible in the class, and just putting on a good show head to head. And it's a popular class. And I don't think it matters what the class is. I think it matters is there an interesting battle? And when we get to the 84 pluses, I think that's probably the best example of that we saw at Worlds this year, of a class that was kind of a write-off as far as, we know what's going to happen there, and one that has historically not been that well spectated and popular, probably because of that, becoming, and I'm planting the seed here, so I won't get into it, but easily, in my opinion, the most exciting of all of the classes to watch, because of the tight battle and impressive performances that pushed what we thought was possible.
What do you think about the future of the 59s, Matt?
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I mean, I don't think it's absolutely necessary that there be a showdown between Waskar and Fedosienko, although that would certainly sweeten the deal, right? That would make it spicier, if you will. But to Eric's point, I just think with the talent pool, how do I phrase this tactfully? Because I've been around for a while. It might, world championships nowadays are harder to come by just because the talent pool is deeper. And matter of factly, there's a larger population of lifters, and there's a larger population of higher quality lifters and stronger lifters. So winning a world championship nowadays means more than it did, a decade ago or 20 years ago. So, as this talent pool continues to rise, more people come into the sport, per Eric's notations just a moment ago. Yeah, we're going to see 2, 3, 4 lifters in the 600s, in the low 600s, and a high tide raises all boats. And so it only stands to reason that, if there are more people come into that class, it's just going to make everybody better, and it's going to make Waskar push harder. And so, again, I don't think it's necessary that Fedosienko come back. I mean, I know Waskar has said pretty openly he would welcome that. He would welcome the challenge. He's not running from anybody. So yeah, I mean, that would be something that I would like to see, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think Waskar is putting this class back in the conversation, back on the map, if you will. And there's a heightened awareness around it now because of him, because of his the way that he carries himself, and he is charismatic, and he's a polished lifter, presents well on the platform, and that helps too.
Ivan Campano from Spain, he is already entered into the 600s, took a silver medal, and born in 2001. He's younger than Waskar. He's going to catch up. At least he could be a threat for the future.
Mm-hmm.
To Eric's point, we can look to the past, but we can also look to what the future is bringing us, just like the 84s did. Let's move on to the 66s, gentlemen. And this one might have been the feel-good story. I don't know. We don't know everybody's background stories, but my God, is this one a hard one to top? Coming into this, with the 4, there was the big 4. Senyumong Kasamsan from Thailand had the world record total. I believe he broke that at the Asian Championships, which is an international competition. But Kyoto Ushiyama had also totaled 710 and up, as well as Brian Lee. So we had 3 lifters who were 710 and up. Just phenomenal. And Brian Lee, the American, massive deadlift that looked like it had no upper bound limit. We're talking a 66-kilo lifter who could deadlift into the 700s. It's something just a few years ago is crazy. So the stacked class, in terms of what is the most stacked class on the men's side, 66 is probably somewhere in that conversation. We'll put a pin in that until after we're done all the different divisions. That's what Penna was facing. Now you look at Penna's background story. Anybody who heard the Penna Giotis preview show leading into Worlds, he's talking about everything he went through 2012, bombing out at Euros, losing his world title and not on a close. He lost it coming fifth. He was sick from COVID. His dad is sick, and I mean severely sick. He talked about his dad losing 30 kilos, which is close to 70 pounds of body weight. Didn't even recognize him. And his dad, I just dropped the post Worlds episode with Penna today. I haven't advertised it yet, but Penna saying his dad, who never shows up at any of his competitions and never tells him you're going to win, you're going to do this, or puts pressure, called Penna and said, "You're going to win this one." And Penna was like, I'm fourth and I'm fourth by a mile. These guys are 7'10. My best is 7. And he said they use from the nominations my Team France qualifying meet, and it was like 687.5. That wasn't a light day for me. I didn't sleepwalk to that total. I went all out. That's all I had that day. So my nomination of 687 or whatever, and theirs of 710 and up, all three of them, that was real. We don't have odds in powerlifting, but if we had odds, he is for sure the underdog. This is an upset victory of all upset victories, despite the fact he's a defending world champion coming in. And then his dad surprises him with showing up, and his dad has never before watched an international competition with Penna. So the mounting pressure and storyline is insane, and he's obviously the sentimental favorite. And on the podcast, we played clips of Eric saying, "My heart is with Penna," and after listening to Penna's podcast, I swear I believe Penna is capable of anything. But if I use my mind, I'm thinking Kyoto. And it was sound, it was reasoning. It was what Kyoto's done in the past number wise. How did this happen? Matt, how did this happen?
It's just an unbelievable performance. Like you said, with Penna's pre-story. If you haven't listened to that podcast, do yourself a favor and go back. I already listened to the one that you dropped today, so I'm privy to that information as well. And yeah, it's just this storybook ending that that you can only think about writing like in a Hollywood script, right? And it's just amazing. It's like the guy goes from the absolute pinnacle of the sport and winning the world championship to the absolute depths of darkness, not performing well at a world championships last year because of getting COVID and his injuries are well documented. And then of course, bombing out of Euros. But you know what? Give him all the credit in the world. The guy, how can you not love him? I mean, he works tremendously hard. He fights tooth and nail for every single lift that he does. Nobody can grind like him. It's unbelievable. It's inspirational. You never feel like he's out of it because of the amount of heart that he has. And that's, those are the intangibles that you can't measure. You can't measure somebody's heart. You can't measure their resolve. And clearly he's got loads of it. And, he came back and never played the victim, never boo-hooed or pouted or made excuses. He said, I've got to change some things after Euros. I'm not upright enough in the squat, and I didn't squat deep enough, and I bombed out and whatever, and made the technical corrections and came back and wins, his second world championship. It's just a phenomenal performance. I was very quick to drop him a message right after this happened and say, you were right. I was wrong because, like Eric, I picked against him. I picked Brian because Brian had that huge deadlift. And so that I got enticed by the huge deadlift. So, but I was wrong. So, and as far as some of the other lifters go, I thought that Brian clearly underperformed. I thought that he opened too heavy in every discipline, knowing what his PBs were, what he presented in training. And I understand that not everybody tips their entire hand in terms of what they reveal on social media and so forth. But being that this was his first international meet, his first world championships, so literally and figuratively in that regard, he's wet behind the ears, and he's new to this game and this level of competition and this level of judging and scrutiny and so forth. All of his openers were high. I mean, run the numbers and run the percentages, and specifically the deadlift. I mean, to open with 300.5 was just, I think they really shot themselves in the foot there. And so it came back to bite him, and Panna was right there to capitalize on his mistakes and take advantage of those things. And I think one of the ways that you can, anytime that someone wins a world championship, anytime, things have to break their way, right? And this is not to minimize Panna's championship. I mean, hey, he's world champion, just like Delaney Wallace, and we'll get to that in a few. And he never has to apologize for being a world champion. But things have to break your way, and things have to break against other lifters. And so he capitalized on those mistakes, and there he is standing on top of the podium. So, I mean, that's kind of how I see it. I mean, but yeah, I thought Brian Lee underperformed. He could have done better. He opened too heavy, which mandated some smaller jumps, and he missed some lifts and so forth. And you're just, matter of factly, when you go 5 for 9, you're not going to beat somebody who's battle tested and has got the heart of a lion and who's a savvy, veteran like Panna. And Kyoto, he did well until he got to the deadlifts. And I think his final 2 deadlifts just weren't to comp standard. You know what I mean? I think if I remember correctly, they got turned down. He actually lifted the weights, but they got turned down on technicalities. I think it was his knees, his lockout. Yes. It looked like he locked out and got his hips and shoulders back. But sometimes in the sumo specifically, and you can do this conventional as well, you overlock out to kind of sell it to the judges, and then you rebend the knee. And I think that's kind of what they got him on. When I was re-watching the videos, I think they got him on soft knees. And so, that really hurt him, obviously, because he potentially could have, come in silver, or maybe to Eric's point, when he was kind of doing the calculus on his end, potentially could have won. But, I think Casaman was kind of out of it early, you know what I mean? And so it really became a 3-horse race, if you will. And that's kind of how I saw it shaken out. But congratulations to Panna, 2-time world champion. I listened to your podcast today, and if he goes to Sheffield and then he goes and wins another one, I mean, that's right there. He's immediately in the conversation, because you've got Poco and Sergey Gladkick, who have both won 2 world championships, and Panna would be the only one with 3. Furthermore, the impact that this guy has had on the sport. So no disrespect to Brian Lee, no disrespect to any of the other competitors, but it is a good thing for powerlifting. It is a good thing for the sport that Panna gets to go to Sheffield, because it just naturally, he will aggregate more eyeballs on the sport, and that's a win.
There's no question. His star power cannot be questioned. And when you have a guy like that win, Eric, what are your thoughts?
Very similar. And, I was in the same boat as Matt. I just had slightly different calculus. I picked Kyoto. He picked Brian Lee. And on paper, they are both stronger than Panna. I think that's something to acknowledge. But they both made fewer or the same amount of attempts as Panna. Panna only missed his last squat and last deadlift. And I recall, I think, watching his last squat, it wasn't even something he tried to grind at and missed. He kind of came up and then missed it, and that's the grind king. And I was kind of glad to see that, like, based on how hard his second was. Even for Panna, I was kind of going like, maybe don't come out for your third, let's leave it for the deadlift. But I think the 2 stronger lifters kind of left the door open.
Right.
I agree with everything you said about Brian and Kyoto. He only missed his 3rd attempt on bench, which was a 2.5 jump. So he basically got everything out of himself he could on subtotal, and opened 5 kilos heavier than Panna, but then jumped 17. And I thought that was an error. I think that's just, 10, 12, I think would have been very reasonable. And that, I don't know if it would have changed it, because he did lose, by a little more than that. I think he was down by 12 kilos from Panna. So, a 10 kilo jump wouldn't have closed that gap. But I think Kyoto needs to work on the technical execution of his deadlift, and could potentially do with some alterations to his attempt selection as well. And I'm glad that Matt Gary opened up on this conversation, because I think this is an example where different decisions on game day could have resulted in a very different podium, or at least the order on the podium. I think it still would have been, these top 3 in the top 3. It just goes to show you again, it's not just about being the strongest. It is about playing the right cards, if you will. as the analogy that Matt likes to make. And it was really cool to see Pana win. Like, like I said, I just didn't think he could. I would have thought, oh, he'd have to have a 9-for-9 day, and the other gentleman would have to have like 7-for-9 days, and that could happen. But he actually showed up at his strongest and the strongest I've ever seen him. He didn't have a 9-for-9 day, and he still got higher than his highest total registered ever. So yeah, I think this is a really good sign that this class is going to be healthy, competitive, contested, and exciting to watch moving forward. And just to give more credit to Pana on just how involved and how much of a positive impact he has on the sport. We were trying very hard to schedule a podcast with him while we were both at Worlds, when Omar had availability. And Pana had to leave early. He didn't stay for all of the Worlds because he had to go do a fitness expo in France. It's to show how much he's a presence, he's a force, he's promoting the sport, and hats off to him. And that's not easy. So to perform at the level he's at while having all of those plates spinning, and helping the whole sport grow, I just I hope he knows he's appreciated.
Yeah, I think anybody who doesn't appreciate, like people who come in and say whoever's stronger is going to win. And sometimes, but you better be a lot stronger. You cannot come in here and just not take handling. You better have handling in you. This is like in the preview show when we said, can you imagine Matt Gary handled Gavin? And look at Arian handled Gavin, which is great. And we'll talk about that in a second, where Arian was clutch. But handling matters. Attempt selection matters. And for Pana, and he talks about it on his recap show, even though he missed his final pull, he knew he could put the nail in the coffin with the second if he chose it right, and then have an extra bullet if he still had enough. But he actually, that was actually even still kind of planned, where he's like, look, I don't know how many times I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm gonna put crazy pressure on with my second to scare them into making some bad attempt selections, and he did. It's they made poor attempt selections, and because they're a little rattled. You don't know if 285 is his second, where's his third. And the thing that with Pana, because he can grind, he can hide what his third is. Because how many times you watch someone's second to judge how many more they have on their third? You can't do that with Pana, because you don't know the limitless grind he has on any particular day. He uses that to his advantage, puts 285. These fellas load up too heavy on their second, and now Pena's like, on my third, it doesn't super matter if I get it. If I get it, you guys are fucked. If I don't, you're 50 fucked. Let's see what happens. Because you already loaded up too much, because you thought whatever I put for my third, oh my God, he might do it today. Maybe. It's this is wily veteran tactics, though. When he said he's mean mugging guys in the warm-up room, and he's putting a little bit of fear, like, oh, it's Pena's here. Pena's feisty. And then the heart, his background story, his inner belief when you're around him is like, freaking, this guy could sell you a van full of puppies. I'm telling you. So it's it was interesting. It was kind of like the wily veteran and the younger guys who don't have quite the experience, and it showed. I hope that won't happen every time out. Brian Lee's gonna go back home to the US and be like, we got to sort some things out. That can't happen again. He'll listen to these recap shows, veterans like you guys who have been several world championships handling, and be like, I made mistakes. I can't make mistakes this time. Especially, I don't know who's getting invited to Sheffield. Kyoto will be. And I told Penna on the recap show, Kyoto's probably going to be locking his knees now. He'll figure it out. He's got half a year. He's going to be locking his knees. And for Penna, he ain't, like, to Matt's point, he's not scared. Let him lock his knees.
Here's the other thing, too, if I might add. This is the sixth best total, only by 0.5 kilos, or it'd be tied for fifth. The sixth best total we've ever seen at 66 kilos. And oh, by the way, it was on a 7-for-9 day. And I say this, I say this as encouragement, not as criticism. I've just looked at Penna's open powerlifting, and if I looked at it closely enough, he's never gone 9-for-9. So imagine what he can put together if and when Penna makes all 9 lifts. Then we're talking What are we talking about here? We're talking 715, 720, maybe even something north of that, if he gets stronger between now and Sheffield. So, if and when Penna goes 9 for 9, I mean, that's then he's going to look even better, quote unquote, on the nomination. It's not like he had to, because to your point, Ryan, the wily veteran came through. He made 7 attempts, which beat, Kyoto's 6 and beat Brian's 5. And that's, you need to be the best powerlifter. You don't need to be the strongest person necessarily. But anyway, so that's all exciting to see. And like I said, 6th best total of all time at 66. I mean, he's reemerged as the king again. He's back on the top. And so it's his crown now, and somebody's got to come and take it from him. And I know he's going to have a white knuckle grip on it. So
also, yeah, and he's a fighter. So I mean, he ain't going down without a fight. Here's also something else, fellas. How often do we have to hear people blowing up a local meet domestically and then comparing their numbers to what's happening at Worlds? How many times do we got to tell people it's not the same? Come to the IPF Worlds, fly across the world with that travel, multiple time zones, face IPF judging and jury, and then the turnaround when it's the prime time. Notice their totals coming down, the nominations throw them out the window. When are people going to stop? Like, people are going to get humbled. People who are squatting on the line, people who are, they think traveling from one side of a nation to the other was pretty crazy, are going to get humbled if they're not ready. When they show up, be ready to adjust is all I'm going to say, because there'll be a wily veteran like Penna in whatever weight class you're in, who's been to multiple world championships, and you'll come in with a bigger nomination and he might eat your food because you weren't ready. I'm telling you, take this as warning shots. Please don't be that guy. Don't be that girl. We've said it enough. It's real. Okay. Stop comparing your totals to world titles. Titles are won at the world championship. Come on, come all. You're all invited, but please be ready. And having said that, moving on to the 74s. Talk about somebody who's won a world title or two. And for the first time in a long time, Taylor Atwood has lost at the IPF World Championships. The last time he's lost at the IPF World Championships was 2017 in Belarus against Shell Beckler, whom was in the B group. We're not used to seeing Taylor lose. It's just, he's been the number 174 since 2018, and it's usually at times been by a country mile. For a little while, Shell was like, I beat you head to head. You won 2018 when I wasn't there. We're going to sort it out in 2019. Well, Taylor beat him head to head and won Best Lifter 2019. And for most people's money, became the best powerlifter pound for pound. And ever since then, it's been the Taylor Atwood show until this happened. Yeah. And my goodness, a lot of us thought Tim Monagatti from New Zealand was the dark horse and might be the guy to do it. He kind of did. However, Kale from Sweden, my God, his final deadlift, and he looked like he had more in the tank. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and you guys are going to help me unpack this. We have some controversial calls. Taylor's third squat, I personally did not see an infraction, and I personally was not happy about how that went down. And I think, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Taylor feels the same, and I think he has reason to do so. Taylor's third deadlift looked a little sketchier to me. I haven't reviewed it multiple times. I obviously seen it live, seen the replays, and then seen it afterwards again. That one was sketchy. And we could talk about your guys' opinion. I value your guys' opinion, and I know Taylor values your guys' opinion as well. And then on top of that, even if Taylor got his third squat that I thought shouldn't have been taken away, the way Callie pulled that third and final deadlift, what are you going to say about Callie Johansson? His name's Carl for anyone listening, but he goes by Callie. What are you going to say about that kid? He looked like he had more in the tank. I don't know. Was it a Penna moment where it would have been like, it doesn't matter, load it. It doesn't matter, give him his third dead. It was always going to be me. He won. So I'm resisting the urge of Taylor's. It's different how Taylor feels when you're the athlete. He's allowed to feel like this was taken from me or whatever. To an extent, it's healthy for athletes to get back on the grind and just do their damn thing. George Foreman talks about you're delusional when you're an athlete. You have this inner belief that, like, you have to evaluate and fix mistakes, but you also have to have an inner belief that can't be shaken. They're different. They're not going to be like coaches and not going to be like us. But Callie also, how can you take it away from this kid? It looked like it was crazy, his final pull. I don't know how much more he had in him, but the way he jumped up and celebrated with the side in the crowd, I'd never seen like that before. His fellas jumped out and they tore down the barrier, and it was wild. Eric, what are your thoughts?
I have a few. I think the mental attitude of a lifter can vary at the highest level. I talked to some lifters who did not think they were capable of the total they ended up putting up and winning, or didn't see it coming, or they needed the belief of their coach to tell them that was the case. And like you said, others are trying to maintain that duality between being able to be objective enough to make adjustments, or at least listen to a coach who helps them do that, while also having an unshakable belief in their unlimited strength. At least that's the way they see it. I think if you layer that with the reality of powerlifting now has changed in terms of what the jury and the judges are doing. 2 white lights is not enough anymore, basically. And for those who don't know, what I mean by that is the jury now, which sits to the side, either there's a 3 or 5 person jury. There was the whole time at Worlds. When there are 3, it needs to be a unanimous decision. When there's 5, they deliberate, and it needs to be 3 out of 5. Anytime there's a non-unanimous decision on the platform by the 3 primary judges, so 2 whites, 2 reds, the jury can review it. And in 9 out of 10 cases while I was at Worlds, because I was watching them, look over to them every time there was 2 whites, they deliberated. And the number of overturns was a lot. So the way powerlifting was that the jury is basically going to sit there and do nothing unless someone comes over and challenges or protests their own lifter or another lifter's lifts. And we've talked about that in the Sheffield preview and recap, how that works. I have to put down a certain monetary equivalent to show it's a bona fide thing if you're challenging someone else's lift. But it's very common to go and protest your own 1 white, 2 reds. But what is not common, and what was the norm, was that every time there was 2 whites and 1 red, the jury looked at it. And when the jury felt that on the replay they could make a better call than the 3 judges on the platform, they would. And I would guess that there were more overturns in this event than there ever have been in any other world championship, based upon what I saw. So that's a paradigm shift. And what that means is that lifting to standard is now a higher standard. It needs to be something that on replay, 3 out of 5 or all 3 jury members completely agree with. If there's only one person on the platform, one of the platform judges who doesn't. So that was something that was present. And I talked to a number of the lifters. Scary, frustrating, made you feel like maybe you didn't have as much power or control on the platform. But ultimately you got to adjust to it. And it is what it is. I don't know if it's going to stay this way, but that's what it was like. So I can tell you, every single time there was 2 whites, previously be like, "Ooh, sweet, two's all you need." So there's even like the 2 white light podcast, it's a thing in powerlifting. Now I can tell you, heads are on a swivel. You see 2 white lights, boom, everyone in the audience looks to the left and they see what's the jury table doing? Are they all crowding around their camera, or are they just looking real quick and not going? And when I was commentating, I had the privilege to commentate on 3 different B sessions. That's what I was talking about. Like, oh, got 2 whites. Let's see, is the jury active? It's not something that we ever needed to say previously. So with that background context, I think that's important to know, because I think that gives some understanding to what was going on. And yeah, like you said, Taylor was in a rough spot when he did not get his 3rd squat when it got overturned. He jumped from 270 to 277. I would have put 7.5 kilos on his total that he would not have had to deadlift. I also did not see the infraction. I watched it a couple times and I watched it in person. I didn't see it. Doesn't mean it wasn't there. It just means I didn't see it. And I would have probably made a different decision. But I don't know, maybe if I'd been sitting closer in one of those spots, it wouldn't have been the case. But that put Taylor in a very rough spot. And going into deadlift, he had a tough decision to make. He went 292, 310, and then 323. And when I saw the 323, I was like, not the actual attempt, but the decision to go up that much, I was nervous. That's probably more than I would have taken to try to push the field a little bit. I think I would have gone 7, maybe 10, and just play the waiting game. But to your point, Ryan, Callie, his last pull of 328, which was a world record after just setting a world junior record. There was a little bit left, but it's sumo as well. Sometimes when there's a little bit left, it doesn't mean that you can necessarily control it. So it was hard to watch. And I don't fault the team for jumping to what they did on their third deadlift very much, because they ultimately only had to do that because of the kilos they lost on the squat. So that was really, really interesting. And all of that is happening while Tim Monogatti's in the mix, right? So there's attempt changes going on galore. And, Taylor's last deadlift, it just wasn't quite fully locked out. So I did agree with that not getting counted. And then kind of just on the other side of that line, Tim Monogatti's third pull of 324.5, temporarily a world record, was enough to put him in a position where Callie had to deadlift more to tie him and win on body weight. So there was only a 0.5 kilo spread between first, second, and third, which was just crazy. And I remember finishing that session like, what did I just watch? Did Taylor Atwood is he in bronze? Like, oh my God, and all these final pulls. It was extremely exciting. And I thought nothing could top that. And I only found out that I was wrong on the very last day of Worlds. But I was in shock watching that for a good 10 minutes after it was over, because it was pretty nuts.
I mean, you say you're wrong last day of Worlds. You might have been, but this is close. I don't know. It's tough. I don't know. 80, you're referring to 84 plus, obviously, and that's one of the greatest sessions I've ever done as well. Matt, you are very close with the strength guys. I think you might even add input into some of the attempt selection. You could probably give us some background on what were your thoughts on this and how this unfolded.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, it's no secret that I'm friends with Taylor. I love him. I'm honored to call him a friend. I'm very close with Jason Tremblay, and I am going to sound like a Taylor Atwood apologist, but that's my guy, and I'm going to go to bat for him, and I'm teaming Atwood all day, every day. But just looking at the squats, and again, to be fair, just to put it in perspective, and Eric did a phenomenal job of discussing the referees and the jury and so forth. I've been a national referee for over 20 years. And so, and I think it's an important piece of not just giving back to the sport, but furthering my development as a coach and as an athlete. It makes you better because it makes you understand the lifts, biomechanics, how people move. And when you can see things through that lens as athlete, as coach, as also a referee, and looking through different lenses at each time, you can begin to identify with what other people are going through. As a judge, you understand what the lifters are doing if you're also a competitor. Let me start by saying that the referees have the 3 best seats in the house, or at least they should. I do want to touch upon something before I kind of get into this, Ryan, if it's okay. I saw a shift in judging in the IPF back in 2006. And that just means that I'm older than most of your listeners. But in 2006, at the IPF Equipped World Championships in Stavanger, Norway, that was the very first time that I saw what we call, or what we should know as, the side referees in the squat essentially move up front. And so now what it looks like when you look at an IPF platform, it essentially looks like we have 3 chief referees, albeit the 2 quote unquote side, and I'm using air quotes, referees are set off a little bit to the side. So if we're kind of using the analogy that if the lifter is the center of a clock, right, the head referee is sitting at 12, and the quote unquote side referees are probably sitting at 11-ish, maybe 1-ish, maybe 10 and 2, but they're still up front. And I saw this change in 2006 in Norway, and I'm kind of like, what the heck is going on? Why have they moved up front? And I still don't know why they've moved up front. And, it's funny how we create narratives in our mind that we think make sense, right? And so it's like, okay, are the spotter loaders in the way that they can't sit on the sides and see? Is this something that we're trying to make more aesthetically pleasing to the eye for viewers, for the live stream, et cetera? I've heard discussions about powerlifting get into the Olympics for a very, very long time. And I know that one of the retorts from the Olympic Committee back in the day, and this was a while ago, was the emphasis should be on the athlete, should not be on the officials, should not be on the spotter loaders. And you have too much going on the platform all at once, kind of using weightlifting as an example. Now, weightlifting is this clean aesthetic. There is the lifter. There are no spotters. The loaders are off to the side, and you have the athlete performing and doing their performance. Powerlifting clearly is much different. The lifts by nature require spotters for safety purposes, minus the deadlift, of course, where you can have the performer performing. Having said that, it lends itself to a more cluttered platform because you don't want to be lugging iron calibrated discs from afar. Bumper plates, you can roll, if you will, and so on and so forth. So it makes loading a little bit more efficient. So, but again, and I'm not trying to go off on some tangent, but in 2006, I kind of wondered, what the heck are the referees doing moving up front, right? Because back in 2006, there wasn't such a thing as live streams. We hadn't started live streaming yet. These world championships were not on live stream. And this is pre-Raw. Raw didn't come along until 2012 in the World Cup. So I kind of wondered. And ever since then, we've had the referees sitting up front. And so, I still to this day don't understand why they're sitting up front, and it gives a weird view of the hip crease, which is predominantly what we're judging for squat, right? That's the main thing. That is the red card for the red light, is depth. And if that's what we're looking at, it is incumbent upon the referees to position themselves. They owe it to the athlete. It is incumbent upon the referees to position themselves at a vantage point so that they can best see the hip crease. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking. Well, them sitting up front at kind of 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock, they have that angle that is going to be unobscured by the spotters. What I'm saying is sit back at, 4 or 5 o'clock, 7 or 8 o'clock behind the platform, kind of where we see the referees judging the bench press, right? And get that angle of the hip crease. Because looking from the front, it's easy to lose track of the hip. It's hard to see. And you're matter-of-factly further away from the lifter. And so that's one issue that I have with just the judging. And I'm going to get into the analysis here in just a second. The second point that I want to make is you have a jury sitting on the other side of the room. Let me start by saying I am very much in favor of having a jury. Our sport is growing. We need to take advantage of technology. We need to utilize camera angles. We need to utilize replays. All other professional sports utilize them. If we are to legitimize our sport, if we are to grow our sport, if we are to achieve and push new boundaries within our sport, and we've got lifters and athletes pushing the boundaries of human performance and exceeding what we thought was possible, we need to give them every opportunity to do so. And when you have 5 people sitting very far away, further than the judges are sitting, and those 5 people are looking at presumably the same camera angles that we have on the live stream. Am I right, Ryan? Is that what they're looking at?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. I don't know 100%, but I'm pretty sure that's all they got.
Right. So why are we having 3, or to Eric's point, when there's a jury member, a team of 5 people sitting across the room at that, and I saw on the live stream, they were essentially sitting to the right of the lifter. If the lifter is facing the front of the audience, they're off to their right. You know what I mean? So they're at about 2 o'clock, out that way. They're at 2 o'clock. They are further away from the referees. And if they are constantly overruling decisions that are made by the 3 people who are way closer to the action than they are, then what does that say about their level of trust with the referees on the platform? Right? They are commissioned to do a job, the people on the platform. And now you have jury members who, again, have the advantage of an instant replay and so forth. But the instant replay that they're looking at is only looking at the lift from one angle. Do you see what I'm saying? And we all know that lifters can have one hip higher than the other. They might have one elbow, for elbow depth higher than the other. And if we're only looking at one angle. So what I'm saying is, what I would propose is a variety of camera angles and split the jury up. As a matter of fact, put a jury member behind the other judges. That only makes sense, right? Have one jury member looking at one hip and so on and so forth, and split them up. And then they confer on major decisions. Look, we have to, tip the scales in favor of the athlete. I understand that this is a high standard, and I think that's why people come to the IPF. There's prestige, there's cachet with competing at an IPF World Championships. This is the pinnacle of the sport. Well, it ought to be that we're pouring, if this is the pinnacle of our sport in terms of divisions and federations, then we ought to give our lifters and our athletes every advantage that they can possibly have to try to tip the scales in their favor, so that they can, they're not guilty until proven innocent. It's always, I understand that Ty can't go to the runner every single time, particularly when there's a world record. You want that to be irrefutable. All I'm saying is that those are some of the problems that I have with some of the judging. I thought that it was incredibly inconsistent. I thought that the rate at which the jury was overruling things was absurd. I thought it's egregious for a head referee sitting up front to call depth when the two quote unquote side referees, again, I'm saying side, say that the lift is good. How's that possible, Ryan? And that happened a lot. I saw head referees making calls repeatedly for depth when the side referees thought it was fine. How can the audacity that one person might have up front saying that I can see the hip crease better than you can see the hip crease, and yet I'm sitting in the head chair. So there's problems there. Furthermore, and I'm sorry for the long tangent, but this is all right.
It's okay. Interesting. Right, I haven't seen that like this in a while. Here we go.
Here's the other thing. A lot of these referees don't compete. The president of our federation, Gaston Parage, has he ever competed? A lot of the IPF brass has never stepped on a competitive platform. Okay. And you mean to tell me that I'm not saying that a referee necessarily has to have been a competitor, but I guarantee you, if we got all of the IPF referees in a room and we put a diagram up on a whiteboard or up on the wall of squat depth, and I handed out 2 stickers to every single referee, and I said, I want you to walk up on the whiteboard or on the board up here, and I want you to put 1 sticker on the top surface of the knee, and I want you to put the other sticker at the top surface of the crease of the hip joint. I guarantee you there would be dots all over the place, because different people have different interpretations of what that point looks like, right? And you have a Gavin Aiden or my wife, Susie Hartwig-Gary, or Ray Williams, who've got tremendous quads and a quad sweep. Their thigh looks different than a Dana McNeil, who's long and lanky, or a Jess Bittner or somebody like that. And so to that point, I don't know that all the referees are on the same page. And I think it shouldn't be once a referee, always a referee. I think the IPF referees, I think all federations should re-credential their referees and also have courses and so on and so forth to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So that's a long way of saying, I know that I went off on a tangent there, that I thought the judging on balance was poor. I thought it was inconsistent and in many times unfair and egregious. And so having said that, I've watched Taylor's third squat, and I can't find anything that's wrong with it. I thought it was a bad call. Now, I've made mistakes as a referee, and referees and judges are entitled to make mistakes. They are fallible. They are human. But I thought that was a bad call. And had Taylor had those 7.5 kilos, perhaps we're talking about a different outcome. I'm not saying necessarily, because to your point, Callie looked, his third deadlift, he crushed it. Now, if Taylor had the extra 7.5 right there, he would have had to have pulled 335. Right. And if Taylor's last deadlift had counted, or if he'd taken, presumably, if Taylor had 7.5 more in the squat, he probably wouldn't have gone up 13 in the final pull. Maybe to Eric's point, he takes the 7 or he takes the 10. Yes, I was in communication with their team. And when we saw Taylor's second deadlift, and given what Callie was doing, everybody unanimously thought 12.5, that's what he's got left. And it had to be a chip on at 323. That was the number. So we all thought that. And look, It was a red line kind of deadlift. He's operating right on that line, and it was not a thing of beauty, which also gets to my point. And I think we saw this as a theme that permeated the World Championships all week of these limit deadlifts. If it's not clean and tidy, it's almost like they're immediately going to turn it down. We saw that with Jess Bittner. We saw it with Kim Walford. We saw it with a lot of third pulls. It's almost as if to say that if your legs shake or you struggle or strain and it's not ballet, and we know that max lifts don't look like ballet, they're going to turn it down. And so anyhow, I thought Taylor eventually locked it out, but that's one of those 50-50 or maybe even 40-60 balls, if you will, where it's probably not going to go his way. It didn't look as clean as it should have. So there's that. But look, hats off to Callie Johansson and Tim Madigatti. My God, you come down from 83 kilos and you show and prove at 74, almost hitting the lifts and reproducing your efforts at 83. So hats off to Tim Madigatti, and he cleaned up his execution because he was known for squatting high, big time. I mean, he squatted deep. Now he's got the world record in the squat. He took Taylor's world record. So hats off to Tim, and he executed like a pro. You know what I mean? And Callie just had a little bit more there at the end with the final pull, and that's that deadlift can be the ultimate equalizer. So, look, the Taylor Atwood era is not over. I've had private conversations with Taylor. Taylor told me, matter of factly, he hates losing more than he likes winning. He knows what's in front of him. He's a dog. He's the king for a reason. And I know that Taylor is going to take this L right on the chin, but he's not going to make excuses. He's going to get healthy. He's going to get back in the lab. And he's going to come back with a fury. And I can't wait to see it. And selfishly, very selfishly speaking, I really hope that they put a bunch of 74s at Sheffield. That's what I want to see. That's the rematch I would like to see, is see these three cats tangle at Sheffield, kind of like we saw the 93s before. So
I think they're going to tangle no matter what somewhere, and it is going to be bonkers. They're super duper tight, and if Perk comes over from USAPL,
sure.
Perk's got to be ready. He's got to be paying attention to these calls are super duper tough. Perk has done international travel though. He's been in the IPF. He went to the University Cup. I forget where it was that year. We're going back some years, but Perk has done international competition. He's faced international judging from IPF. It's been a hot second. He can reacclimatize to it, but it'll be the 74s are hot again. This just makes the 74s hotter now that Taylor's vulnerable. But to your point, Matt, if Taylor got that squat, got that deadlift, his total would look ever so more better. And then all of a sudden, and that's him a little diminished. And if he's 100%, what are we talking about? It's going to be interesting.
Right. I know it's, we're saying shoulda, coulda, woulda. And look, again, I'm not trying to minimize the performance of the other people in that class. Hats off to them. It was phenomenal. And nobody can ever take that away from you. You're an IPF world champion. I'm just saying that, a lot of people have poo-pooed Taylor and said, oh, he's been hurt and his performances have been down. Yeah, but that just boosts his argument as far as I'm concerned. This cat is still, last year even dinged and kind of cruised to a 790 total. He's come in at less than his best and oftentimes wiped the floor with the competition. So we saw this time he comes in short turnaround after Sheffield, obviously, injured, made improvements since Sheffield, no doubt. He made improvements. He was better. He was healthier than he was at Sheffield, but still not the 100% that we're used to. And oh, by the way, it took him missing 2 lifts on controversial calls, and you still only beat him by a half a kilo. Now, that's not to say that Callie couldn't have loaded up to 335 or 340 and a half, which is what he would have needed, for the win. He smoked that last deadlift, and maybe he would have gotten it, especially in that moment. You kind of rise to the moment. But yeah, so that's, it's an unbelievable storyline. It is a huge upset. And but Taylor will be back undoubtedly. I have no doubt about it.
A couple things I want to say before we move on to the 83s. Number one, 100% believe that Tim is squatting better than ever, and
yes,
perhaps it's something to do with lighter body weight. easier to hit depth when the under load. I don't know. The mechanics change. He lost significant weight. 9 kilos is nothing to scoff at, and he is squatting better. Another thing, Kelly Johansson's progress, rate of adaptation has been insane. When I watched him win Junior Worlds last summer, if you would have told me he's going to total what he totaled in the Open World Championship and beat Taylor and Tim at the same time, I would have said there's no freaking way. This kid, and then even at Swedish Nationals when he hit 754, I was in people's DMs talking about this kid's a threat. He's a threat. And people like, do you understand how many kilos he's got to put on? I said maybe if he puts on another 20 kilos, or like another 20 kilos. Like, what if he puts on another 10? He's in the 760s or 760s, and they're like, you don't just throw kilos around like that. And I'm like, this kid's rate of adaptation is that high. And from him to be from what he did at Junior Worlds to 754 at Swedish Nats to now we're at 778. Do not sleep on this kid, everybody.
Nope.
It only gets worse from here for you. It's only going to get worse from here. Can he if he says wherever his next competition is, I'm going to have another 20 kilos in me. I'm tipping over 800. Believe him. Believe him. If not, guaranteeing it's not a joke. He throws on 20 kilos every couple months. And this is like, history is the best predictor of the future. This is what he's been doing for a year straight. I know there's a cap and it'll start slowing, but the kid's a junior. He's still a junior. And he's doing this. We're not even close. We're not close. Yeah, it's good. He's coming. So hats off to Kelly Johansson. I got him booked on the podcast. I can't wait. He's got a phenomenal story as well, background story. So excited to see that. Any parting shots, or we should move on to 83s, gentlemen?
Let's go 83s.
Let's
83s.
move on.
Back to back, Delaney Wallace. Now, Delaney has faced some opposition now, and it's the same old story with Enaharo. But I want to ask you guys about things like attempt selection and how things might have been different for everybody. Delaney also got some calls against him. And we could talk about that as well. I want to get your guys' feedback on that, as well as, so Canada's Nick Manders was missing lifts, but that's nothing unusual for him, and had to load up on his final deadlift, and that's nothing unusual for him. Let me throw this out here, fellas. A couple things I've observed. And this was some talk in the hotel lobby discussion. Enaharo chose 370 for a second pull. And then after that, he's pulling for the win. Let me pull these up right here. So he chose 370.5 for a second pull. And after that, he chose 380.5 for the win. Along the way, he hadn't missed yet. Nick Manders missed his second bench press, controversially with his head, and then missed his opening deadlift and had to retake that opening deadlift weight of 340. So in essence, he retook his opening deadlift weight. He never took his second deadlift weight. He had to jump from his opening deadlift weight all the way to 367.5. He's going over 800 pounds as an 83, pulling for the podium. Enaharo hit 350 opener, hit stop at 370, and then went for 380.5. Now, Delaney along the way, we'll touch up on Delaney, and I want to get your guys' ideas on those calls he got on a third squat and a second bench press. Ultimately, the third deadlift, he didn't hit it, but he ended up not needing it. But here's the theory. Did Nick Manders smoke his epic third and final pull on the strength of, with how fast everything's moving, he didn't have to hit a secondary weight and he was fresh, and he was always going to load up. He just needed to be close enough that it wasn't a ridiculous jump that it felt too heavy in his hands. And did Enaharo fly too close to the sun with his second pull? And these 83s who are pulling 800 pounds and up need to start adjusting and realizing if you're going to load up like crazy in your final pull, you're going to have to do something later on your second. If you're going to go all in to an extent, you might even do an Emil Norling where you don't even come out for your second if you're going to go that heavy. And you're just going to full. If you're here, look at Enaharo's won silver. Now he's won bronze. If next time he's like, I'm coming for gold, period. What are we talking here? Take an opener a little heavier. Don't come out for your second. Is there something to this, fellas? Eric, what do you think?
Maybe. I I think Anahara made the right calls, actually. He jumped 20 from his opener to his second, which is not insane when you're pulling 370, 380 by any means. And he, like, what he took on his third is what he would have needed to win on that day. And I think he knew if he was going to go for that top spot, he was going to need a pull around there. His subtotal improved. He is shown that he's getting better at squat and bench, and he went 6 for 6 into his deadlifts. I mean, he had an 8 for 9 day. So I think Anaharo did a very good job, and I think he probably did about as good as he could have. And the interesting thing with Nick Manders is, so I was there watching this. He was getting a call to re-rack the bar on his bench press because his head, by view of the head referee, was off the bench, which you can't have. From what I could see, again, further away, it was just his hair that was off. And, you know, I don't know if the IPF technical rulebook specifies between hair and head, but he had to re-rack it and unrack it 3 times, and he timed out. And he did have more kilos left on his bench press, you know. So it's possible that he goes into his deadlifts with another 7.5. And he ended up pulling 367, right? Which is the most he's ever deadlifted in competition, to my knowledge. Mm-hmm. But he had more left, you know, which is pretty surprising. So you have to wonder, you know, he's self-coached, right? Which is, I think, a factor. So when he is sitting down with, you know, Garrett Bentley and Ryan Stinn, who did a great job being the head coaches for Canada this time, would they really have let out the rope that much without necessarily having, you know, self-coached athlete? Here's giving you information. You're probably looking at some videos, and, you know, I think, you know, you had a long episode with Nick, and if anyone wants to listen to that, I think one downside to the approach that Nick takes is that he may not have as much objective information to provide to the national coaches for them to make a good decision, and especially if it means we have to be less conservative. So I think, given what happened with the bench press and missing the opener on the deadlift, he did very well. I think 367 is, I don't know that they all thought that's a lock, even though it looked like it when you saw him pull it, like, oh, wow, he got that pretty convincingly. So, you know, if he'd gone 340 and gotten his opener, I don't think he would have gone 367 on his second, obviously. Probably would have been something more like 360. And then they could have gauged a little more, maybe pushed a little further. I don't know. But then again, maybe he'd been tired. It's hard to say. So I think it is very interesting. I don't know that I would take the strategy of, let's just get 2 deadlifts and conserve energy, because kind of high risk, high reward to some degree. But it was really interesting how things shook out. So that's kind of answering your question directly, Ryan. Ryan, do you want me to get into, you know, Delaney and Jurens as well, and just how this class went in actuality versus the expectations? Or should we shift to that?
Let me also say, I think Anaharo did a great job in the squat and bench press as well, and I wouldn't have changed a thing for those attempt selections. Bang on the money, and agree with you 100%. In terms of his progress in the subtotal, he's come a long way, and it's only going to improve. He's also a super young guy, and he actually told me he's gained 3 kilos of body weight, which isn't going to super duper affect the deadlift, but will help the subtotal. So I think we're seeing improvements all around with there.
Yep.
And take it with a grain of salt. He did say on his third deadlift he was gassed, and so did Delaney, but he also said he liked the strategy for deadlifts. So I'm just hypothesizing, but you're right. I agree, it's high risk, high reward. I'm just saying, if you're going all in, but it is what it is. Go in with everything. Jurens, and Delaney. Let's go all in.
Yeah, you know, I talked a little bit to Paul Marsh, and talked to Jurens a little bit in some of the other sessions, and he just had a shitty day. You know, when it really comes down to it, there wasn't a great explanation for it. It could have been a number of things, but there was no clear-cut reason, and it was just a frustrating experience for him, I'm sure. That's probably putting it lightly. But yeah, he just didn't have it on game day. And I also had the privilege of, I had some good long conversations with Delaney. Shout out to him and Sierra. They let me, I got like invited to sit at breakfast with them because of a confused person who like took our room numbers, and they're like, oh, for 3? because I was right behind them. And I was like, oh no. And then they were like, yeah, you can join us if you want. And I was like, are you sure? I didn't mean to. And
you put the breakfast on their room.
Yeah. So they paid for it. They didn't realize that till
Classic.
afterwards. Yeah.
Nice.
I actually wasn't even staying there. I was sleeping in a hallway and just
right.
kind of,
Perfect.
No, but it was funny. So we had a nice breakfast and I got to talk to Delaney as he reflected on winning but not doing his best, which I think as any high level athlete who wants to progress, he struggled with that. And I'll let him speak to it if he comes on or if he wants to post. I won't go into too many of his feelings about his own performance, but what he was pretty open about, and I saw him talk to other people about this, is he was coming in knowing he was beat up. So he kind of felt like this was Delaney with shoelaces and bubblegum holding him together, and he was going to see what he could do. So it was an interesting thing where Jurens didn't know he was going to have a bad day. Delaney was expecting a bad day, but he did as good as he could have, given that he was beat up, it seemed like, while Jurens just kind of went, oh, shit, and it all kind of fell apart in front of him. So it wasn't that exact, like we expected, clear cut. There's a battle between 1 and 2, and then a battle from, 3rd and 4th, maybe all the way to 5th, considering, Nick and Adam Jansen total in the same number at Nationals. But really, like, Inaharo did a lot better than we thought, pulled himself all the way into 2nd, and Jurens kind of took himself out of the competition, finishing, believe it or not, in 6th, which was, honestly, I just think kind of unfortunate. But it's not like he had a terrible day. There was, if you look at 3rd place, with Nick Manders finishing on 797, you go all the way down to Adam Jansen, who finished in 9th, but it's 780. So, like, there's a very, very, very tight clustering in this weight class. And it was quite a dogfight. There was a lot of shifting. There was only a few kilos separating spots. But Delaney did enough. He ended up 815, pretty beat up. And for those who don't remember, at Sheffield, I think he totaled, was it 837, Ryan? Is that right?
Yeah,
in the 830s.
It was 835.
835.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, not far off that. And yeah, I mean, I think that class did not go as we expected after the top spot. And I've said a fair bit, so I'll leave it there. But I think Delaney does deserve a lot of credit. There was a number of Sheffield lifters who really struggled to repeat something similar to their performance. Not all of them. There's some notable standouts, of course, like Evie just kind of shaking hands instead of doing a world record deadlift and still totaling the same. Tiffany Chapone, obviously, and we'll get into that. But I think for a lot of the lifters, it was a pretty tall order to come back from an all-out performance, chasing records and putting up their sometimes their lifetime best total at the Sheffield to then be ready at Worlds so quickly. And I think to Delaney's credit, he was able to put together a good enough performance in a relatively stacked field. And it was, some odd calls and unexpected performances, unexpected poor performances that shook out to make, basically 2nd through 8th. So, yeah.
Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I have a lot of the same thoughts that you guys have and that Eric has. I guess I'll kind of start from the bottom. I picked Jurens to win on the preview podcast, and when we did the picks, I'm closer with Jurens than I am with Delaney, and to that end, I just was privy to see some of Jurens's training that he wasn't sharing with the rest of the world, and it was blowing my mind, and he was on point, and I'm thinking to myself, he competed at the British and kind of cruised to that total, leaving more, and his lifts were exquisite. And then I saw him perform, several SBD days at basically really close to body weight or kilo over, which is nothing that he can't water cut off and so forth. And I thought, wow, he's, Delaney's going to have his hands full. And so I really, was that's why I was sold on Jurens. And to Eric's point, I talked to him afterwards and he just, whatever, some days you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you just have a bad performance. And sometimes you just can't explain it. And I'm not sitting here making excuses for him. And I love Jurens, and he's the kind of guy who takes accountability and responsibility for his own actions and doesn't make any excuses, and, has said quite clearly that he just didn't have it. And Delaney was the better man and these other lifters out totaled him. And so I think Jurgens comes out, hits his opening squat, and then took a pretty robust jump to his second. I thought it was, arguably based on how the opener moved, maybe just a stitch heavy, but within his range, a 15 kilo jump at that strength level is not out of the question. Jurgens has this thing where he occasionally turns his squats, and the guys on Sabado kind of make fun about him for it, is that he kind of turns his squats into like a pause squat. Like it's almost looks like he kind of pauses in the bottom before he comes back up. And he kind of did that with the second one. He got stuck. And then, of course, comes out and repeats the weight for his third and, cut it a stitch high. And I think that was the right call on the platform. It was high. And things just kind of, unraveled for him there. He misses his third bench and his third deadlift. And that's why we were talking about him being in sixth. Then kind of working my way up the ladder here before we get to Delaney, of course, the champ, two-time champ. Looking at, Nick and Anaharo, I have a little bit different take in terms of the attempt selection than Eric had, and I'll explain myself here in a second. First of all, Nick, like Eric said, and if you listen to the podcast, go back and listen to that one if you haven't already. He's an interesting character, and being self-coached, like Eric said, perhaps is not able to provide as many data points to the national team coaches. So maybe in some respects, they're coaching, I don't want to say blind, but just less informed maybe. And that's not a knock against Nick. I mean, he made 3 squats and he missed the second bench. And I thought that was, I'm sitting there yelling at the screen because, to Eric's point, he was getting called for his head off the bench. And I don't believe it was as if he'd lifted his head off of the bench, as in lifting it. I believe that they were knocking him because they felt like he was lined up to, the top of his head. Now you have to understand the way that our heads are shaped. The crown of our head is not the back of our head. So I believe that his skull was on the bench, but his hairstyle also makes it appear that his head is hanging off the bench. And so I think for those reasons, you had a really picky head referee there who was just overly picky, if you will, and made him replace the bar. And like Eric said, he timed out and then he had to repeat it. So, what's to say that he didn't have, another, he jumped from first to second. So presumably, let's say he made the second attempt, he would have probably jumped another 5 to 170, right? That probably would have been the jump had it moved well. So we are talking about another 5 kilos there. And then of course, his opening deadlift, he stands up with it so fast, and kind of rocks back and forth. And I think that was the issue there with the first one, is just he stood up so violently, wisely repeated, and then just kind of said, hey, I'm going to, go full send or close to full send, and then pulls the 367.5 comfortably, and to Eric's point, looks like he had more there. So I was correct in my prediction that 2 guys would pull over 800, and we had 2 guys that did it. So credit to Nick for pulling himself into that bronze medal position. Now, as far as Anaharo goes, that is one I am completely, and I'm speaking entirely out of ignorance here, I don't know anything about the Hungarian coaching staff. So I don't know what calculus did or didn't go into that. I didn't know if he had a personal coach that was a frag. I know nothing about the people that were his game day coaches. But that is definitely not how I would have called the deadlifts. I have a hunch. So his previous best deadlift coming into this competition was 362.5. Right. And you can look at his open powerlifting, and he's been wildly inconsistent. Undoubtedly has prodigious pulling power. We all know that last year, the scare that he put into Delaney last year, almost locking out, what was it, 385 last year, I think it was. Right. So, I mean, it was closer with the 385 last year than he was closer with the 380.5 this year.
A lot closer.
A lot closer.
That close. This
one was not that close. So here's the thing that I'm saying. If he has a 362.5 deadlift, a previous personal best, then based on that, if that's your PB, you're probably opening, or I would have him open somewhere in the range of 330. Now, granted, he didn't show all of his cards in training, and presumably he had gotten stronger than the 362.5. I mean, for crying out loud, he almost locked out 385. So we know that he's got a max somewhere between 362 and 385. We just don't know where it is, presumably somewhere in the 370s, mid 370s. So if you're basing attempts off of that, you're going to open lighter than 350. I thought 350 was just too much of an opener. Yes, he can sustain a 20 kilo jump, no doubt about it. But because you're opening, I have a sense, again, I'm ignorant, I'm speaking out of ignorance. I have a sense that he just kind of, or the coaching staff kind of just was in a wait and see. Like, okay, we're putting in 350 and we might have to change that deadlift, but that's going to be our opener based on what the competition is doing, rather than saying, here's my current strength level, here is what my training data say, and I am going to call my attempts based on those things, which is normally what I would do. And I get it. At World Championships, you're playing to win, you're playing strategy, all of those things. I just personally, if he knew that his top end was going to be in that mid 370-ish range, 350, just matter of factly, is too heavy of an opener. And even if it's too heavy of an opener by 5 to 7 kilos, that's 5 to 7 kilos. And it's too much. And so the 370 just took too much out of the gas tank, if you will, for him to be fresh enough to pull the 380.5. And oh, by the way, there was a math error here. He only needed 380. He did not need the 0.5. Now, I'm not going to be a guy who says that at 380 kilos, the 0.5 makes a difference, because it doesn't.
He would have smoked it.
Right, exactly. Right.
But he was lighter on body weight, which is. But he
was light, right? So he was lighter on body weight, so he didn't need 380.5. And I don't know if he was thinking in his head, "Well, damn it, if I win, I want to out total him." But I have no idea. I'm not going to speak for him. He can speak to that. I'm just saying, matter of factly, it was 0.5 too heavy. And would the 0.5 have made a difference? No, of course not. It would not have. I'm just talking from a strategy standpoint. You always want to take the absolute least amount you need to engineer and secure a victory. And he took a half a kilo too much. But having said that, he put, once again, the fear of God into Delaney. I can't imagine what Delaney was thinking in the back. You know what I mean? Oh no, this again. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, Delaney had some misfortune on his third squat. That third squat was overturned. I thought it was good. Again, I wasn't sitting there. I wasn't in the crowd. I wasn't in the audience. I thought his third squat was good, and they overturned it, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? And then the second bench, I think they got him on soft elbows. And so they turned that, which was, I thought, kind of weird. I thought
both calls, I didn't see it in real time. Neither one.
And here's another problem that I have. Again, sorry that I'm banging this referee's drum, but the rule as it's written is that the two side referees, they begin with their arms raised. The chief referee is waiting and only required that one referee drop their arm in order for them to give the verbal command to squat or the verbal command to start. Okay, so if they're only waiting for one arm to drop, and one referee is going to keep their hand raised, presumably for, knees being not locked like Taylor, okay, or elbows not locked like Delaney's bench. If we know that they're going to keep their hand raised, but the chief referee is already got the other person to drop their hand and they're going to give the start command, we already know that Delaney is then going into that lift with one red. And that's a problem. I don't think it should be that way. I think that they should be required to replace the bar, and there should be a verbal announcement of what your infraction is, and then you give them the opportunity to correct that, right? So they should have said, replace the bar, elbows, and then Delaney would have known, and then he could have taken it out, locked his elbows better, and gotten the lift, versus, oh, by the way, you're allowed to start the lift, but one person is already giving you a red no matter what happens from here on out. And I think that's a problem. I don't think it's fair in the squat or the bench. Okay. So having said that, I think those, anyway, that's my thoughts on the bench press, but Delaney went up 2.5 kilos because the strength was there and he got it. So good for him. Happy that he did that. That's a time when you take the chance, you try to squeeze out, an extra 2.5 out of the orange, so to speak. I thought Delaney's attempt selections could have been better in the deadlift. He went 310. The 325 was really hard for a second attempt. That was a tough attempt. And I knew based on that he doesn't have much left. I thought 330 was the right call based on how the 325 looked. I thought the 325 was too much. And frankly, I thought a 310 opener based on his strength level is just too much. So I thought the attempt selection was poor. Now, having said all that, and I'm not picking on Delaney. I love Delaney. I like the guy. Okay. He is an IPF world champion 2 times. He won, whatever analogy you want to use, whether it's winning ugly or winning on, his worst day or whatever analogy you want to use, nobody can take that away from him, right? 2-time IPF world champion, got the fear of God thrown into him by Inaharu, not once, but twice. Please, Delaney, don't let it be a 3rd time, right? I mean, you can't let this happen again. And I'm sure he's hearing that from a lot of people, so he don't need to hear it from me. But congratulations to him. I don't give a damn that he won ugly. It's just like when you go to the Super Bowl, man. Stats go out the window. The World Series, the NBA, who cares about the stats? It's about winning. It's about winning a world championship. And Delaney did that. And nobody can take that away from him. So that's back to back. And not a lot of people do that. So credit to him for outperforming the rest and being able to hang on, and it was close. But
we also do not yet have someone who's won the 83 kilo division world championship 3 times, if I recall correctly.
And
so he's among some pretty impressive field, unless I'm wrong.
A couple lifts go his way, a couple calls go his way. That total is going to look a lot more handsome as well.
And
then maybe that 3rd pull, maybe the deadlifts they pick a little differently because they felt under pressure. Right, like Inaharu scared the shit out of him in South Africa to the point where they still have emotional scars coming into Malta.
And all I'm saying from a strategy standpoint, if you know that there's a guy who can literally come back from the dead, and Inaharu had a great meet. He was like Eric said, he was 8 for 8. This kid's put on muscle on his frame. He's more jacked than he was. All of those things are going to boost his total. But if you've got a guy who's lurking in the shadows, who has the capability of doing that, all the more reason you have to make 3 deadlifts so that you can put this sucker away. You need to make 3 pulls as opposed to, we're going to be more aggressive on the first 2. You have to bank. You've got 3 bullets in your gun. You have to use them. And I think lots of times people get spooked. And so they open heavier, they bump an opener, they pull heavier on the second, and they miss the 3rd. And so you have to go in with the mentality of making your 3rd attempt. I'm really big on that. I know a lot of people try to win the meet on their 2nd pull because they rationalize in their mind, tomorrow isn't promised. And I know that, believe me, I know the data better than anybody. 50% of the people miss their last pull. I get it. But you have to make your last pull so that you can fend off people. And you have to go in with the mindset that you are going to make the last deadlift. You can't be thinking, I'm only going to make 2. No, you got to make 3. So anyhow, credit to Delaney. No, he's world champ. I'm happy for him. Good for him.
It'll be interesting to see how everybody adjusts come next year. Mm-hmm. And if they reevaluate maybe Inaharu, if he's like, he doesn't have to bypass the 2nd attempt. That would be the most all-in way to do it. But guaranteeing the last pull you're as fresh as possible. But just adjust to a point where it's like maybe a little more realistic. You maybe can't do 2 miracles in the same day. So you get 1 miracle.
I think it's very tough as an Inaharu to gauge such a kind of go, no-go deadlift. If he's thinking, you know what, I actually do feel confident that I've got 385 today. Now his attempt selection makes a lot more sense.
That's true too.
Yeah. Yes.
It isn't as.
Yeah.
You're right in terms of here's what it is. There's 2 ways because you can reverse engineer it. 385, he damn near got. A year later, he will have. And you reverse engineer a potential, or from Matt Gary's, I'm going to reverse engineer what you actually hit and be like 362.5, like it or not, is what I have you clocked in at your PR. You're both making bets.
Yeah, but we know, and I'm not saying to call the attempts off at 362 because we know proved. Right. Yeah, his max is somewhere floating in there in the middle of there. So split the difference if you don't have any training data and call the attempts off, off of 372 or 37 or something like that. That's all I'm saying. I just have a hunch that they kind of play this wait and see game. What do we need? And they're reading and reacting, which, yes, you read and react to a score sheet, but you need to be proactive going into it. And I just don't believe in pushing all of my chips to the center of the table in the second attempt, because I encourage and believe my lifters are going to make their third ones. And that's how I coach. So
it's, I think the reason why we're in this situation, gentlemen, and we all have different takes, or maybe kind of the same, kind of not, is because he might be the hardest deadlifter to call on any given day. On any given day, you don't know where his deadlift's going to be. And
I'm also thinking about, like, and we do need to get to other divisions, but
right.
It's not going to get any easier in the 93s. But you also have to think about the conversation you have with your athlete on game day, right? What is your goals? What are your priorities? Would you rather secure bronze or silver, or do you want to go all in for the win? And I could be making assumptions about where Anoharo is, but if he's thinking, I need to put up the biggest total absolutely possible, and I will risk it for the proverbial biscuit because I want the gold, then you're going to go with your optimistic max on deadlift. And that's where my head is at. I think they were operating off of best case scenario, what's my third? And that might have been what they built it. But I do think you're right, Matt, that they were operating from a wait and see perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and we'll see.
Yeah, and even so, look, for the sake of conversation, if 380 was the top end, those first two attempts are too heavy. That's all I'm saying. They just use up too much gas in the tank, and
That's fair.
Plenty of data to prove that. That's all. But look, it was a great session, and like I said, hats off to Delaney, 2-time world champ. So and booked his ticket to Sheffield again.
And man, this is where I thought I still had a glimmer of hope for my KOTL rankings, because I had Taylor picked for the 74s, but then I had Delaney, but I didn't have a whole lot of confidence behind it. And then after this, things started to, and then I actually, to proceed things, I did get Keiko right as well. It was my
nice
actual pick.
Yeah.
Nice segue for me, my man.
Go for it.
Let's move into the 93s. I will just say real quick about Delaney. Fantastic that for a little while there, he was going to go the USAPL route, and he went the IPF route. And now look at him, 2-time world champion, 2 times at Sheffield, and has really carved out his own pathway. And it just goes, sometimes you just carve your own. He was going to go USAPL to chase Russ. And a lot of people are thinking that because Russ is such a big beacon of light that people want to chase. But sometimes deviating, like, I'm going to carve my own path and see what happens. And I don't know how this is going to end up. When they both split, you didn't know. And now look at him on Eurosport, Sheffield, whatever. So hats off to my man. Everybody knows him now. So moving into the 93s, and Jonathan Heiko, for a little while there. So I dubbed him Mr. Perfect because he won so many competitions in a row at the highest level, 9 for 9, 9 for 9, 9 for 9. It was incredible. And then finally, the one lift he missed was for the win last year. Rallies back, wins the 93 Clash at Sheffield, ends up on the podium in second place. Phenomenal showing. Comes back at this World, reclaims his title, goes 9 for 9 once again in a sensational battle once again. Surprise, surprise. And I'm like, wow, Mr. Perfect's back. He posted in his stories about how he doesn't like the name Mr. Perfect, because perfection means no longer growth, etc. I forget what name he preferred now. I'm having him on the podcast. I'll ask him. But he would like a new nickname. And maybe that's appropriate, because mine wasn't so much about growth. It was just literally 9 for 9. But is this a new second half of Jonathan Keiko? Or is this a continuation of the Jonathan Keiko era with a small hiccup in the middle? I'm not sure. Either way, I'm going to let you guys dive into this, but Gustav Hedlund taking the silver medal. Also a phenomenal day, only missing his last bench press, but ending off with an 875. I know his total went down slightly from Swedish nationals, however, and I'm not sure if I expected him to try to load up on his last deadlift to try to pull for the win, or how this was going to go, but he ended up pulling 345 and ended up with an 875. Emil Krastev, his total dropped a little bit from last year. It wasn't quite the total he wanted, but he ended up in a bronze medal once again at IPF Worlds. Can't be mad at that. Last year, he took a silver. I think the year before that, I forget where he ended up, but he's a multiple time medalist at the IPF Worlds.
Can I interject just a
Sasha,
little bit there,
yeah,
Ryan?
hop in there, sir. Hop in there.
Just to give some credit to Emil, his total might have dropped from last Worlds, but it is up 40 kilos from where he was at the Sheffield, where he was struggling with injury and just basically there to try to get a bench press record. So I hope Emil's crest has his head raised a little bit. That's an incredible performance improvement in a short term turnaround time, even if it isn't his all-time best. So just to put that out there.
100%. Yeah, and I'm gonna let you guys go even deeper on this. I'm gonna skip past pretty quick, but what you're 100% right. He was heavily injured, and there's not a lot of time around. I don't know how he even pulled his body together when he was that injured for Sheffield, and then turns around Worlds and I'm 5 kilos off what I did last year. But yeah, and ended up on the podium no less. Sasha Stenderbach from Germany. Listen, usually struggles in squats. Got a monster deadlifter. We all know this. He opened up on his opener on squats, and my God, I thought it was a third attempt, and I'm like, here we go again. Here we go again, dude. What are you doing? You backed yourself in the corner. Matt Gary's probably shadow boxing right now with this attempt selection. You're opening way too high, and you're going to hear Matt. That's one of Mac's biggest critiques is don't open too high and leave yourself room to grow. Holy smokes, man. Hit all three of his squats, and his last squat looked better than his first. Hit all three of his bench presses, and then goes on to hit all three of his deadlifts and ended off with a 365. And it's like, my God, I never in my life watching his opening squat would have thought he would go 9 for 9. I was like, there's no way he's going to get there. He's opening too heavy. So Sasha had a really good day. Ended off with an 860. Gavin Aiden, what are you going to talk? What can you say about our boy Gavin? It was again. I'll be quick and I'll let you guys dive in a little longer. But it's the same old, same old. That third squat eludes him. He opened up, missed his opening squat with a bit of a stumble. Now, this is where I was talking to Gavin, and he thought Arian would load up 322.5 for a second. He was thinking 322.5, right? Now, Gavin loaded, what ended up happening was 310. And 325 was his last squat that ended up getting overturned. Here's where the expert handler coming in, like Arian, can save the day. The lifter has eternal trust and belief and might have been like, we missed the opener, but we go 322.5 for a second. If 325 got overturned, well, like just 2.5 kilos less, 322.5 probably was dangerous, if nothing else. That's where Arian is like, we cannot take risks. We're going to do a 310 intermediary, get you on the board. Ended up with the third squat. I'll get you guys' opinions on that. It's borderline. It wasn't as convincing as the second or his first. His first he missed by stumbling. And he was super upset about it. I'm not sure what they're going to do to fix this. He posted a picture of himself hitting crazy squat depth with a lot lighter weight, obviously, but he's working crazy on his squat depth right now. I don't know if his feet are out so that refrigerator body can drop in the middle of those knees or what it is, but he's going to come back. He was incredibly upset with this being overturned. And I think for all intents and purposes, we know he needs to build a huge amount in the squat event if he's going to threaten for the overall. We said this in the preview show. He knows it. It took a lot of character for Gavin to rally himself after being that disappointed. And I had a chance to see him in the warm-up room after squats. He was extremely disappointed, vocalizing it, pulled himself together, and come out for the bench press, tying a previous PR that he hadn't tied in, I think he was saying 18 months to 2 years or something crazy, taking a podium finish in the bench press. And it just showed a lot of grit and character from a guy who keeps getting told you got your squat, and either that's a world record or a world title threatening, and then goes to the back and finds out, no, sorry, you didn't. It's starting to get tough for the guy. Whether you thought it should have been taken away or not, it's an emotional up and down, and we all know how emotional inside Gavin gets. But turned it around for the bench press, showed a lot of grit, went 3 for 3, and surprisingly enough with the deadlift. Based off of his third deadlift at Sheffield, and we thought he had like 5 more kilos more. I think we all kind of agreed on that. Surprised that he missed his third deadlift here. He started gassing, and he said he's got to work on that. Again, here's another guy that I'm obviously going to have the podcast again, and we'll talk to him directly. But it is what it is. It played out the way it played out. Matt, what are your thoughts here, sir?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with Gavin since that's who we're talking about. So, I picked Gavin to win, and just to let people know, I was on some consulting calls with Gavin and his coach John Sung before the championships, and I helped collaborate and help them install the game plan for the meet, and I also encouraged him to utilize Arian. I wasn't sure who was going to be handling Kaiko, but I figured that it would be one of Joseph's coaches, as he wasn't allowed to coach. But I wasn't exactly sure how the division of labor would go with the other national team coaches. So just in my opinion, I felt like Arian was the best game day coach in the room, so to speak. So I encouraged him to use Arian, and he did. And I thought Arian did an excellent job. The plan was, for Gavin, I'll speak transparently, was to go from 302.5 to 322. That was the plan. Second attempt, right in that neighborhood, and then take a shot at the world record on the third to use a chip to our advantage and leverage that in our favor. And we knew going in, just like you said, Ryan, that he's got to get a third squat. That's where he builds his total, is on the front end, if you will. And he's got to have it. So when he stumbled on the first one, I'm like, oh my gosh, he lost his balance. And I know that he said, I had a discussion with Arian kind of after the fact. Arian was telling me that he was squatting a little bit faster in the warm-up room. In other words, kind of, I don't want to say dive bombing it, but just dropping faster to ensure that he could get deeper. And that was working for him. And Arian said his warm-ups looked fantastic. He was hitting depth in the warm-up room. And then, of course, he stumbles. And so I'm thinking, man, well, maybe this is like a Chance Mitchell situation like we had last year in the 93s where Chance got called. And then Arian, of course, was the game day coach in that situation. And they went up to their play in second. And so I was very much in favor of saying, you know what, everything's on the line here. Let's push him to the second attempt. If not 322, I was thinking maybe 320-ish, or 317 at the lightest. Arian settled on 310, and I'm not second guessing Arian for 1 second. Arian is a legendary game day coach. I trust him. I trust his judgment. He was there with boots on the ground. I wasn't. I'm watching the live stream. I don't have my finger on the pulse of this thing. I'm thousands of miles away. And so they settled on 310. But when you settle on 310, then that essentially takes the world record off the board because you're not going to jump, you're not going to jump 21 kilos. So my thinking was, hey, look, he did fall. He stumbled. But Gavin's not going to put it this way. He's not going to miss 322 or 320, one of those numbers on strength. He's going to hit it. It's a question of, like you said, Ryan, is he going to get deep enough with 322? Right. You know what I mean? Because it's close to 325, which was his third one that he did get called on. And I thought, the 325 was really close, and you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt when it's borderline. I thought that it could be called high because it looked kind of parallel to me. But yeah, it's really unfortunate that he wasn't able to make those, to get credit for his third squat and be in a position to get the world record. Now, having said that, I'm in communication with Arian via text message during this whole thing and so on and so forth, and also in communication with his coach, Jong Sung. And we collaboratively decided, and I should say, so this is where, I kind of didn't agree with what Arian did in the squat, but they decided to push their chips into the middle of the table with the bench and be more aggressive, which I was not in favor of. I didn't let that out at the time, but I'm just speaking transparently. So, but I am admitting I got it wrong, right? We were projecting his top end to be 215 to 217. And John was emphatically saying, look, his bench training went well. I've got confidence in, let's seize the opportunity to make up some extra kilos. And I'm telling you right now that I was wrong and they were right. They made the right decision. They were more aggressive with his benches and they tied his PB. I wasn't in favor of that, but it worked out and he got bronze in the bench. And then as far as the deadlift goes, I think that was the least confident data point for us, simply because, he hit the 340 at Sheffield with room to spare, might have had 5, 7, maybe even 10. I mean, he killed that 340 at the Sheffield.
Yeah.
But because Gavin had only pulled that once, essentially, in his life, he kind of had less comfort, if you will, less confidence in the deadlift. But we knew that look, all of these competitors, Kaiko, Gustav, Emil, everybody who's in the running, everybody pulls within 7.5 kilos of one another. So we kind of thought that magic number to get him up there is going to be 340 plus, right? And so that was kind of why I think they settled on the 342. So I'm not second guessing Arian. And like you said, he was just running out of gas at that point. And, I also thought that was one of the overarching themes of the championships was these short flights in the A group, only having 8 lifters. I just want to let you know, I've gone back, I've combed through the live streams and I've checked the time on these flights, and these flights were averaging just under 22 minutes per round. That is fast. Okay. And you mentioned on the podcast with Panna that this is a Eurosport thing. They're trying to package this as a product. They're trying to make it more palatable, more viewer friendly. I get all of that, but it comes at the cost of the athlete when they are you're going to see decrements in performance. I'm telling you, if you want a quicker, shorter flight, you're going to see the Jesus Olivareses passing their third attempt squats, and you're going to see other lifters passing their attempts, and you're going to see decrements in performance. If we want to see the best athletes compete to the best of their ability, then I'm in favor of something being done and the flights being longer. The maximum allowance for a flight by IPF rule is 14. I'm not suggesting that we have 14 lifter flights. I am suggesting that it's more than 8.
There was also just 7-minute breaks between the disciplines.
Right, Eric, you were there. So you guys had your finger on the pulse more than I did, but I can tell just from watching the live stream, this was like a track meet for a lot of people.
How about this? What do you feel about this? Someone threw this out there. I forget who it is. I'd like to credit him, but it's out of my head now. But how about this idea? Instead of 8, 7, top 7, and it's 14 solid ass. It's just all fire. Or is that?
Yes. So my wife, Susie, brought up that as well. She said, make it 7 and put it in one flight of 14. Okay. The only problem that I have with that is, and I've been a proponent and a person that's gone to bat for women for a long time. And I'm very much pro women's sports and that sort of thing. And I just don't want the women to feel like they're not getting their shine. And I just have a sense that in some respects that they could be interpreted as they're being outshined. I think the women should compete with the women and the men with the men. And so I don't necessarily, yes, that would solve the problem, Ryan, logistically speaking, because then you just have one big flight of 14, right? But that can get a little bit long and a little bit cumbersome. I think, you know what I mean? I think really the sweet spot is 10 to 12-ish. You know what I mean? Is in terms of maximizing human performance, but not being too long and too clunky and somebody presumably possibly getting cold. I mean, look, Ray and Jesus and those guys, they'd love a flight of 14. You know what I mean? Because they get maximum rest. But so anyway, I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I think that 8 is too few, and it's like a track meet. And so Gavin, getting back to this, was kind of running out of gas. And I think that's why he missed his last one. But getting into these other lifters, like Eric said, Emil bounced back beautifully from the Sheffield. I did not know that he was that far back. So hats off to him and Kedrick Kwan. Whatever recipe Kedrick's got cooking is working, because he's back really close to where he was. Not quite as where he was, but he's back. Gustav performed phenomenally. I mean, the only lift he missed was that third bench, but he lifted very well. And what more can you say about Jonathan Kaiko? I mean, this guy, he just doesn't miss. I mean, and so you're foolish, if you've been against him. I mean, I went, look, I went with Gavin. I did consulting with Gavin. I was all in on Gavin. I thought that, his talent is eventually going to rise. And I still think that, everything was in Gavin's favor on this day, right? The training went well. He had body weight and he had lot number. So I'm not, you mentioned on the podcast, Gavin didn't let anybody down. He didn't let me down. He didn't let anybody down. Like you mentioned on Panna's podcast, he made that comment to you, Ryan, in the lobby. Gavin, you didn't let me down, brother. I love you with all my heart, and I do still believe in you. It's just these opportunities, and that's what they are. They are opportunities. Don't come around too often. And all the stars aligned. We had lot number, we had body weight, we had everything. We had potentially a chip to our advantage. I don't know that this same opportunity will come around again, because next time we may not have lot number, we may not have body weight, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, look, and everybody's getting better and leveling up. And again, going back to Keiko, this guy just doesn't miss. I mean, he just, I think him missing at the Sheffield on that, yeah, he doesn't miss. And so at this level, when we are determining who is the best power lifter, not necessarily who's the strongest, you've got to use all the bullets in your gun, and all of your shots need to be on target. And that's what Keiko does. He doesn't miss. The guy builds, it's not sexy, you know what I mean? Except for his, the only outlying performance that he has is his otherworldly bench press, you know what I mean? But the other ones are like, okay, he's going to squat 300, 305, whatever, stay in pocket, make lifts, build the total, and he's going to be there at the end. And this guy is there every single time, domestic, international, you name it. And I DM'd him and congratulated him, and I couldn't be any happier for him. I'm excited for him. This guy just keeps on trucking, man, and it's unbelievable. I mean, this is ties the second best total, because his other total that he did, 892.5, was a home game, so I really don't even count that. This 888, now he bumped the world record up, and look at him back at Sheffield with an opportunity again to make more history. Phenomenal performance, absolutely exquisite. Can't say enough good things about him.
Yeah, no, I'm going to throw this to you, Eric, but for him to be continuously the number 193, 9 for 9 at this level, hitting PRs at this level while others gas, he hits a PR. That's when the cream rises to the top. Hats off to the kid. He's got a crazy heart on the platform, super nice guy off the platform, a great representative for powerlifting, and he's proven himself so many freaking times. This is the Jonathan Keiko 93 kilo era. I feel comfortable saying he's got an era, because he's won just so many battles. He's been in number 193 for years now. Eric, what are you thinking? Kind sir.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and echo that, because we talked about the era thing. We talked about just how hard it is to make a statement in these middleweight classes, like 83 and 93, because of just how competitive they are. We talked about how there were some missed opportunities because of COVID, but you're still able to see that at the national level, he's a dominant favorite. There was the year where Chance came out, he got relegated to third, but second place at Sheffield to the best powerlifter ever in terms of the total you can put up, and now a second world championship to his name. I think we are seeing that he is, by virtue of being the most consistent performer and being strong enough, and on game day, he's the guy to beat. And this whole session was actually a little different than we predicted in terms of the competitiveness for that top spot, because both Carlina and Keiko came in and they did their job. They went 9 for 9 and no one could touch them. Mm-hmm. And there was a fight for silver because of that. There was no moment in either one of these two divisions. And I know I'm jumping the gun to the women's, but I think it was interesting because I was there and we had to sit there and go, shit, we just don't think Jess has a pull to take Carlina. So let's see if we can get silver. And I know that was a similar discussion. I think I didn't get to see the 93s in that well, except for sneaking looks while I was on the platform at the stream, because it was the same session as the 76 as I was coaching. But if I recall correctly, I think Emil had to pull a little more than he would have needed to get silver, just because he didn't have lot number. I don't remember how it exactly shook out. Sorry, not Emil. Apologies, Gustav. So there was a battle for second place, and Gustav Hedlund came out on top. I think he actually was weighing lighter than Emil Krastev, but had to take a little more just because he was pulling second. I think that's what happened. And the other thing I noticed, again, just adding a little bit of flavor to Matt Gary's comprehensive coverage and what you said as well, Ryan, was I did get to watch Gavin's squat on the camera, and without thinking about it, I just reacted. And once I saw, and I was like, oh, that might be high. And then I saw the two white lights. I was like, I think I looked over at either Ryan or Garrett, or maybe it was one of the New Zealand coaches I was standing with. Like, that's going to get overturned, and it was my immediate response. So it was unfortunate, because I don't want that. Like, I want to see Gavin at his best. And to Gavin's credit, exactly what you said about coming back and doing so well in bench press. But
Mhm.
I trained every morning while I was there at World Championships, and the day after the competition, um, he was in there getting a bodybuilding workout in while I was squatting and doing some stuff, and he took some time. And um, I'll just say that he was very solution oriented in his conversation with me,
Mm,
and and I think that speaks to the grasping hold of the right attitude. Um,
Mhm.
it's also an opportunity to say, man, did you see how they're overturning everything and these refs and all this stuff? And man, they're out to get me. They just don't like that I'm, popular and on Instagram or whatever. Like that is that's the comfortable way out, but it's also the disempowering way out. And I don't say that I hate when athletes don't take responsibility. No, it's like let's think about this pragmatically. Let's think about this philosophically for a second.
Mhm.
Taking responsibility for your wins and your losses is very, very important, because then you can learn from it. It is nice. It's easy to take responsibility for your wins. Like, yeah, that was on me. The things I did were right. I did well. Um, but it's easy to then not take responsibility for your losses and put it on somebody else, put it on a ref, put it on some other external factor. And that, in the immediate sense, makes you feel better. It makes you feel okay, gives you a sense of safety, it calms your emotions. You don't have to expose yourself to those negative emotions, but it also sets you up for future failure, because then if it wasn't your fault to why you lost, then you can do nothing about it. So by acknowledging whatever your role in it and being solution oriented, you empower yourself to look for solutions. And to his credit, he was on that immediately, and I had a lot of respect for that attitude, and that he was turning over stones already, the morning after. So I fully expect Gavin Aiden to come away in the not too distant future with a world championship title under his belt at some point. It's just hard to see where he doesn't keep putting himself, like, he's strong enough, right? And he's not. I don't think he has an attitude that's going to preclude that from bubbling up to the surface, if you will. So anyway, I'm sure that was a tough outcome for him, but it was a pretty impressive performance by Keiko, just to continually stack those chips to where he just wasn't touchable in the end. And yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. The Stendenbach poll was pretty crazy, to where he came in 8 for 9 and actually bumped Gavin Aiden down a spot. And it was a very gutsy poll, a very great performance. Kind of came out of nowhere. Even though he didn't podium, I don't think he was probably favored in the top 5 or even 6, arguably. So those are kind of the things I had to add. And I was also just really pleased to see Emil Krastev perform pretty damn well, in the 870s. And I know for him, he was a little disappointed in his performance, but I would encourage him, and I talked to him about this, to view it as, now you're fully recovered, you're back to baseline, you're injury free. And I asked him, how he's feeling in the warm up room, and he was like, I have no pain. And this is a very new thing for him to now from here be like, all right, and now I get to improve. And improving from an 870 total in the 93s it's good,
right.
that most years guarantees you a top 3 spot. So if that is where you're jumping off from, watch out. I think Emil Krastev should be back on people's radar.
Yeah, the 93s continue to be,
Yep.
one of the hottest divisions, if not the hottest division in the men's. And that can only increase, because right after Keiko won, Brendan Petrie looked like he announced he's going to be coming over, and he showed a picture of Lithuania, which is where the IPF Worlds will be next year.
Goodness.
Now, my man's getting a little ahead of himself. He's got to go through Nats, and the way Nats is looking, if we have, I don't know how it's going to work. If Keiko, because obviously Keiko's going to Sheffield, if it's Carpinos or what the hell, but to get on the world's team, he will have to contend with Gavin Aiden, Jonathan Keiko, and God knows who the hell else from the US is going to pop up. I mean, they're all capable on any given day. They're all capable. I can't wait to see how this shakes up. It's crazy to think that one of these guys won't even be able to make it to Worlds. They're so talented. It's crazy to think we're going to lose one of them by the time Worlds rolls around. Those gentlemen I just said, and those gentlemen are A-class phenomenal lifters. Won't get into too much. I'll turn into a PA Nats preview show, but go ahead, Matt.
I just have one final comment.
Yeah.
Just actually two comments. Totally agree with what you just said, Eric. Gavin's approach to it, extreme ownership, if you will, kind of taking a page out of Jocko Willink's book. It's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And I think that's what he's doing, and he's going to come back, and we all look forward to that. Selfishly, I would like to see a Jonathan Keiko, a Gavin Aiden, a Gustav Hedlund, Emil Petrie, all of these guys. I mean, imagine if there was a world where we could have all of those guys at one meet. I am saying this. If you're coming to take Jonathan Keiko's crown, you are not going to beat him if you make fewer than 9 attempts. I'm just letting you know.
Oh.
That's not so, because he's going to make his 9. So you damn well better make your 9. And I don't think there's anybody out there who is currently strong enough with a high enough ceiling to beat Keiko with fewer than 9 lifts. You're going to need to use all 9 bullets in your gun. Just saying.
And for Keiko, if he could somehow make it to Worlds through like Sheffield qualifying, whatever the heck, and that's where you meet him, Keiko can lift at the world standard after having traveled, time zone change, face IPF judges, and go 9 for 9 in front of them with 27 white lights. That's one of his biggest. That's where it's like, beat me like that. I'm not going to face you at Nats, or if he could avoid that and through whatever Carpinos or whatever they work out and make it to Worlds, Heiko can be like, oh shit, fellas, this is going to be harder than you think now. It's better to face me at Nats than it is at Worlds. On the flip side, I want to see. Sorry, go ahead.
And then he will put on his white fedora and style on you at the banquet, just to say.
But on the flip side, kind of interested in seeing what Gavin Aiden's like at the national level, huh? I don't know. Is the jury as overturny over there? I don't think so. Let's see what this is actually a good thing. If Gavin Aiden shows up at PA Nats, he might be like, oh shit, son, I'm going 9 for 9 now at the national level. I'm getting my 3rd squat. Now let's see what happens when you play with me. It's going to be sensational. Both PA Nats and Worlds. But again, I'm going to get excited and we're going to get off track. Let's move on to the 105s, gentlemen. It is Return of the King. And just like Keiko, the turnaround was fantastic at IPF Worlds. It was, it crushed some people, but I said the cream rises to the top. Happened with Jonathan Keiko. Happened with freaking Emil Anatoly Novopitsmani, sorry. Anatoly, world record total, 940. Had an absolutely sensational performance. His 3rd record squat, or 3 for 3 in squats with the world record, bench press 3 for 3, and then finally gets his last deadlift. It's his attempt selection's almost always the same. I was talking to Coco Clement from France. He's like, man, his attempts are almost all the same, no matter what the hell the other opposition's doing. It's like he's not even paying attention to what everybody else is doing. I could tell you what he's going to do 3 days in advance. And I think he did within like 2.5 kilos or whatever. He goes, but his last deadlift gets iffy. And he hit his last deadlift, a 352.5 with a 940 kilo total. And I slid into my man's DMs, and previously he's all shy on coming on the podcast, not really his thing, doesn't know English, getting a translator. And I got the green light on this bad boy. So I don't know, man. We're gonna have to figure something out. How was your guys Ukrainian, by the way? Not good. All right, good.
Not good.
Coming into the bronze medal, Emil Norling, defending world champion, misses 3rd squat, kind of have a dive bomb 2nd attempt, and only went up 2.5 kilos, so he sensed the end was near, and he missed it. 3 for 3 in the bench press, and 3 for 3 in the deadlift, and as it stands, that 3rd deadlift, it's key for him, either winning titles, and in this point, with an Anatoly on point, defending the silver medal position because he had a strong charge. Mo from Mohammed Abdullah from Libya taking the bronze. Michael Davis, not having the day that he wanted, but coming in on 4th. He's capable of more than that, and I think in the future he can put up more than that. I'd like to see him at PA Nats and see what he does at PA Nats, but we'll see. Coco Clement, also 885, not the day he wanted. I'd like to see what he does in the future. And Mo from Great Britain also. I had hyped him up. He didn't have the day he wanted. I feel like that same thing happened to Sheffield. He usually comes out like a madman for deadlifts because his deadlift is so on point. And when he's feeling it, he'll let you know, and he storms out there, and you know he's going to crush a massive deads. I hyped him up. Wait do you see him in deads? Wait do you see this madman on deads? Sheffield started having heavy cramps, and he was uncharacteristically tame. I did the same thing now when he's coming out on deadlifts and worlds. I'm like, wait until you think he's getting hyped for bench. And he started getting all hyped. Wait until you see him for deadlifts. Some shit went funky in the warm-up room, comes out super duper tame, didn't have the day he wanted in deadlifts. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna stop saying that and wait until I see the opener. And then I'm gonna start calling it. Eric, what are your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, no, that was a good summary. Yeah, some interesting things. I think Mo was having some cramping in his hands. Unfortunate because that is his weapon. Michael Davis, I talked to him a little bit beforehand, and he is unfortunately injured. And I think he put together a pretty good total based on that fact. And he was just kind of another one of these cases of like, let me see what I can do on game day. I would really want to see Mikey Davis like have the day that he could have and be healthy. That's always a tough thing when you're kind of forced into the corner by your body's condition, but still having a competition on the horizon and also not being so hurt that you have to drop out of it and still being like, top 5 in the world, but you could be top 3 or top 2 in the world. I think that is, it's kind of it's a lose-lose choice. I mean, it's not a lose-lose choice. I mean, still we're talking about people placing at worlds in the Korean the crop when they're injured. Like, I think hopefully they have some perspective to have some gratitude, but also it's a difficult place to be in terms of what decision do I make, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I was really pleased to see Anatoly come out and just be completely untouchable. I mean, 35 kilos with the next person behind him, 940. I also hope that the people like right now, we got the USAPL and we got the IPF, and the most well-known, competitive, and impressive lifters in the USAPL are clustering right around. They don't have a 93 class, but they have a 90. They have a 100. They got a 110. And those are some very good lifters there. So Ashton Rauschka among them. I mean, there's several that are all right there. Bob Matthews, you mentioned Brandon Petrie. So I think it's really good for someone like Anatoly to come in and put up a total like this and make a statement, because it really erodes the narrative that, oh no, USAPL's got the real killers, at least in these weight classes. Because Anatoly just showed up and said, listen, there's everybody else and there's me. And that's exactly what it looked like. He had I think a 9 for 9 day. He put 2.5 kilos on his last time he was at Worlds, and, set a world record total and a world record squat. And then everyone else, again, kind of same thing. Nobody was even in a position to try to pull to topple that. They were pulling for second and third. And Emil Norling showed up, did well, but I think again, like we're seeing, like it's a tough turnaround from Sheffield to Worlds, and both Mo, Michael, I mean, all 3 of them were, I think they all 3 of them performed better at Sheffield than they did at Worlds. So I think it's indicative that maybe that the schedule is less than ideal. And I know that might change moving forward, but I don't think anybody wants to see performance at Worlds be hindered by another big competition. But yeah, I think the big story here was the King is back, and ain't nobody going to touch him with the current crop. Someone's got to come from the USAPL.
Yeah, he just also a little tidbit. He won best lifter. Like, he's the king.
Yep.
Like he's the king again. Matt, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't have much to add, to be quite honest with you. I mean, it was exciting to see Anatoly back on the scene at Worlds, and just this tour de force, right? I mean, just like Eric said, just untouchable. I mean, he's just 35 kilos ahead. I mean, I know that Emil, wasn't at his best. Same with Mikey Davis, nursing some injuries. And then, Mo, love him dearly, but, was suffering from some cramps and so forth. And so that just really put them behind the 8 ball, I think this quick turnaround from Sheffield, as we can see, because we'll get to some of the women who were at Sheffield, it impacts the bigger, heavier lifters, I think, more arguably than these lighter lifters. You know what I mean? And it's just a quick turnaround. And so it obviously impacted these 3 guys that we mentioned, and they just weren't able to to deal with Anatoly. So, but after all that he has been through and his country and so forth, I think it's, he was kind of the sentimental favorite there to kind of win and also get best lifter. So that's exciting to see. And to your point, I think we're going to see, not that if I'm looking into a crystal ball and just trying to predict the future, I think we're going to see a huge exodus of some of these top level lifters after USAPL Nationals this year. If Petrie already said he's coming over, I think we're going to see Ashton and Bob. Sheffield changed everything. It just did. It changed the landscape of powerlifting, and it's had this tsunami-like effect, this ripple effect on the rest of the powerlifting world, and people are getting serious FOMO. And this is the biggest world championships that we've ever had, raw, and with the explosion of the coverage and just more eyeballs on the sport, people want to be a part of it. And so I think people are coming over, and that's good. Again, high tide raises all ships. And so Anatoly presumably would have some heavy hitters coming his way. And that's what we all want to see. We want to see best on best. At least that's what I want to see. So, but really happy for him. I would be very keen to listen to him on a podcast if you can organize a translator.
I'm gonna get a translator. We're gonna work it out, man.
Hook it up, man. Yeah. But congratulations to him, and for the rest of the guys, man, get healthy and get back in the lab and let's see, bring your best. Like you said, Eric, you want to see Mikey Davis and some of these other guys at 100% pushing hard. So,
I'll also add this: Anatoly actually competed sooner than Sheffield. So he also had a crazy turnaround. But again,
and I think he totaled the same in both 940 at Nationals and then 940 here.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Yeah, he's an absolute monster.
One thing I will say while Ryan's catching his breath, I do want to give a shout out to Coco Clement. I know he didn't have the greatest performance that he won. I think 10 kilos under his best, but he is the youngest out of all of these competitors.
Yep.
And I think there's a possibility that his star rises a little more. I think that's just worth pointing out.
Yep. And I would just also add, I want to give a shout out to Anthony McNaughton. So he's coming. He's going to be at, presumably he'll be at PA Nationals next year. So you got another 105er there capable of totaling 9+. And so, the Mikey Davis and some of the other 105s at Nationals are going to have their hands full. So
it's conceivably you could have two 105s coming from the US, and it could be Bob and Ashton.
Right.
Can you imagine Bob, Ashton, Anatoly rumbling? Yeah. And Anatoly, he hit 940, so he'll be behind Ashton, but it's not crazy. And he lost some ground because obviously the war going on. His total dropped way low, understandably. But if he can regain some momentum and add, it's not crazy to say if Anatoly can add 10 kilos, 15 kilos, 20 kilos. And we're at the world scene. Bob and Ashton aren't used to traveling the world and everything else we've already said a million times over. Anatoly has been since 2017 when he was a kid, as a junior competing in the Open. It can make a difference. So their totals come down, his totals come up. We could rumble. I'm not going to preview Mo's show. If you put a gun to my head, I'm probably saying, Ashton or Bob, let's see who wins USAPL. But all I am saying is it's closer than people think, and it's going to be entertaining, and it's going to be can't miss.
And just one thing I'll plant.
Both of you fellas can do one more. Then we'll go.
Okay. I'll just plant a hypothetical seed to just make the pot that much spicier. There's a world and a possibility where, let's say Ashton and Bob did come over, and they come to PA Nationals and they compete against each other, or one decides to weigh in a stitch heavy and compete at 120. And you see what I mean? So you could have an Ashton or a Bob as a 105 as a 105 representative potentially, and then Ashton or Bob potentially as a 120 representative. And that's not to diminish the accomplishments of any of the other lifters. They actually have to come and they have to do it, right? They have to execute when it matters at a Nationals, but we've seen what Ashton and Bob Matthews are both capable of. And so, there is a world where both of those guys could be representing the United States on a national team at a world championships, and they could be in different weight classes, or they could be two 105s or two, whatever. Anyway, I'm just saying One of those guys could be a really, really light 120 and push a guy like Tony Cliff. You know what I mean? With their totals.
Bob said, I want to go 120 after I'm done my business at 110 to 105 range. So, I don't know if before he makes that, he's not saying I would prefer to win a 105 world title and then win a 120 world title. So it could be two division world champions. Or if his body's like, no, we're going 120 sooner. Who knows?
And then please, I want to see Rondell Hunt get back to an IPF world championship.
Oh, hell yeah.
Come on. Like throw all those guys, all of them. I want to see
I want them all. I'm greedy. I want to see them all go toe-to-toe at the world championships because Frank, man, it'd be insane. Go ahead, Eric. What were you going to say, kind love?
I was just going to mention how if people are listening and they're looking at the results scorecard and they're wondering why we're talking about first and then like third through seventh and other people in another federation, we haven't talked at all about Muhammad Abdullah from Libya. Or they're wondering who that is and where did he come from. He actually just came off of a ban failure. I think he competed last in 2017, came out after his ban, competed in African championships to qualify, and he competed. Incredibly strong lifter. And did place second. And I think that's just kind of some context as to why. I don't know about you guys. I'm not sure how long
he placed third.
Did he?
I know.
Because Emil Norling took second at 905, and then Muhammad was just behind him 2.5 kilos at 902.5.
My bad. So why are we talking not? Yeah. I actually dyslexified.
Same point though. Same point. We get.
Yeah. Why are we not talking about the person in third, but we're talking about fourth, fifth, and sixth? And for me, at least, when I see something like that, I'm like, all right, well, let's see how long this person's going to be around. It's possible. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but this is somebody who was off the scene for a while because of a drug test failure, and that could be the case moving forward. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Look I'll tell you straight up. You got a drug case against you in the past, and you come out of nowhere. I'm going to look at you funny. It is what it is, and guess what? You earned it. People are going to look at you funny from here on out. Now, if you're going to be like, I made a mistake, I'm a changed man, whatever. All right, but you got to earn trust again. When you lose that trust, it is what it is. That's fair. Yep. This is
and for me,
we don't have to sing your song on the podcast. We don't have to cheerlead you. This is our opinion and we're allowed to. So
it's not even that, Ryan. It's almost from like a prediction standpoint. It's hard to back a prediction for someone in the future if they're going to be competitive in a class when they might take themselves out of the running because of decisions they're making. And that's, kind of my judgment free zone of that. Just to kind of explain people why he wasn't in the conversation on my side.
There you go. So moving on to the 120s, and this turned into holy smokes, Tony Cliff show. Big man. And he didn't look it for a big guy. Again, some people were faltering, but my man he missed his third bench, but goes 8 for 9 with a 952.5 kilo total. And Tony Cliff now a 2-time world champion in the classic, 39 years old and peaking. It's something else. He's been around forever in powerlifting as well. I mean, he's been around, he's seen it all. So Tony Cliff taking it. I'll throw it to you guys. Sahad Mohammed from Algeria coming in quite a ways back, but taking silver with a 925. And then Indy from Great Britain with a 906, taking the bronze medal. But really, and I love this, he took the world record deadlift and he loaded up with more than he needed for the bronze medal. And honestly, I like that he did that. Some people would say, get on the podium and don't load up for the world record. Don't risk the podium. I love the fact that Indy's like, this is how we're going to end this, huh? And there's only one way it's going to go down. So 386 kilo final pull. Close the show. It was a great show closer for us. Nicolas Perron from the strength guys in France coming in fourth with 895. And then I'll let you guys take it from there. Matt, what are we looking at here, sir?
Yeah, I think, like you said, man, this was the Tony Cliff show. I'm a huge Tony Cliff fan. I love him. I coached against Tony in 2013 IPF Raw Worlds in Russia. And so that's what was my first exposure to him. And he's done it all. He's done equipped. He's done raw. And I think, I think, look, based on looking at the nominations and so forth, we kind of thought that this was his contest to lose. And I think it played out the way that we thought it would. We thought Tony would be in those mid 950-ish range, right around his nominated total. In classic Tony Cliff style, he's going to make 8 or 9 every single time. The guy executes at a very high level. And he doesn't miss that often. And this is a great teaching point, if you will, based on openers. Mohammed Sahad, who came in second place, just looking at openers, Mo's openers were 15 kilos ahead. He had he was projecting 895 off of openers to Tony's 880. And a lot of people would panic. And I knew that Tony and his team would not panic because they're seasoned veterans. They would look at that. And of course, 15 kilo spread is, when you're talking about 120 kilo lifters and the weights that they're shifting is not as much, as it would be if it were lighter weight classes, but they didn't push any panic buttons. I mean, and Tony did his thing and went 8 for 9. And, Mohammed Sahad's squats looked really exquisite. I think he was called for depth on the first one, but it moved so smooth. I was like, wow, this guy creamed 360. He didn't meet the standard, so he retook it, went up to 375, and the 375 looked fabulous. Where he kind of ran into some trouble there was the deadlifts. He missed 2 in a row at the end, and that just took him out of it. And Tony kind of sealed the deal, if you will. And Indy Singh, man, I love him. I love Indy. I love his character. I met him at Sheffield. What a great dude. He and I DM'd a few times, and I knew that he was going to go for that world record, and I was super excited to see him take it. What an amazing deadlifter and a character. And then, of course, Nicholas Peyrud, who I had actually pegged for third. I had Nick coming in third. This guy's an athlete. I mean, by far the lightest of the 120s. He's a rugby player, and again, he's a TSG coach. And this guy makes a lot of lifts, and he went 9 for 9 and put up an 895 total, and wasn't far off at it. And he's 7 kilos lighter, 7.5 kilos lighter than the rest of the field. So anyway, fun weight class to watch. Probably not as competitive and as clustered as some of the other classes, but hats off to Tony. Really excited for him, and of course excited for Indy for the world record deadlift.
Eric, what are your thoughts, sir?
Not a lot to add. Yeah, I just kind of Tony Cliff, class of his own. Even if he'd, gotten that third bench, it only would have been another 5 kilos on his total. And since he didn't, you could say, oh, maybe if he'd only gone up 2, it would have been another 2.5. So he performed very well for his capacity. And there was just like no one was going to be trying to challenge him for the top spot. And the Mohammed Sahad, I think. I'm trying to remember, but I want to say there was some controversy around his final deadlift. I think there was if I recall correctly, there was an appeal. I think he got 1 white and 2 reds, and the Algerian team spent a lot of time arguing and protesting with the jury. They didn't feel that was a fair call, but it wouldn't have even changed the placings if it had gone. So he would have just been another 12 kilos up, which would have put him at 937, which is still quite a bit of ways off of Tony Cliff. But hey, you want every kilo you can get on the platform as a powerlifter. So fair enough. And the only kind of like, moment was, I think if Indy had missed the 386, he would have dropped to 4th. If I'm correct on that, but I'm not 100% remembering properly. And lost on body weight, I believe.
That's right, because it's 11 kilos, and then Nico would beat him on body weight. That's right. Yeah.
So that was interesting. I was like, oh shit! Like he knows he's got this. Do you remember? So the previous world record was what exactly?
It was 385.5, which he pulled at the British. So he chipped it. It was Bryce Krawczyk's of
that's right,
from Canada. So yeah.
So it was in attendance, by the way. So Bryce Krawczyk got to see that, which I thought was pretty cool. I had a brief and good conversation with Bryce, which, by the way, completely off topic. But NAPFs is going to be really, really good. This is not just one of those side international meets that are going on, but Bryce Krawczyk is competing. The 105s, the 120s is going to be nuts with Bryce Krawczyk, Tristan Naselrod, and Mike T all going at it there. Obviously, there's also going to be Ray Williams competing. So it is going to be a really, really exciting meet to watch. That's not one to let fall off your radar for the future. But anyway, that's the only stuff I had to add, was just that there was a tense moment there with Indy's, third pole. If it hadn't gone his way, he would have been off podium, but good on him.
And the only thing that I was going to add, really cool for Tony Cliff, is the fact that, of course, he was within the 95% of the world record. He didn't,
yes.
None of us thought, no disrespect to Tony, that he was going to be able to overtake Dennis's world record at 978 or 978 and a half, I think it is. But he did meet the standard, and so he's going to Sheffield. And Tony, if you know anything about British powerlifting, is really seen as kind of the grandfather, if you will, or the Papa Bear, if you will, of British powerlifting. I mean, everybody looks up to the guy. He's a great dude, and so I can't wait to see him lift at Sheffield, and literally just he'll be the hometown hero and bring the house down. I mean, we saw what Sheffield looked and felt like, and it's going to be a raucous crowd, and I'm excited to see the crowd get up for Tony.
The 120 pluses, gentlemen, I'm looking at the results here, and the one I have in front of me, it chops it off. Obviously, we know that Jesus Oliveras won. On the IPF results page, does yours also not have the 120 pluses?
I'm looking at the Good Lift info score sheet. So,
yeah, I've got it all. I've got it all. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then maybe one of you guys could walk us through.
Here, Ryan, click on this in the chat, buddy.
All right, here we go.
There it is.
But obviously, there we are. Thank you, guys. And I was there live calling it, but Jesus Oliveras, we knew how far ahead he was of the rest of the pack. He gave us, I remember talking to Joey and them saying they're going to give us 1,000-pound squat, and then we'll take it from there. But that is something that they wanted to give to the crowd because he's a showman. He also is going to stay within his means and not, put himself in any situation where he might get injured. But gave us a 455 kilo squat. That's 1,003. It was on Eurosport, very quick turnaround, did not come out for his third and final squat. Misses opening bench by nicking the rack, had to retake it, hit 150, missed 267.5, ended off going 2 for 3. And correct me if I'm wrong, did he come out for that last deadlift?
He did. He actually stood up with it very quickly, but it was coming out of his right hand, and he beat the down command. So he he smoked it. I mean, he stood up with it very fast, as he does with all of his deadlifts. It's just always a hands issue, and is he getting his knees locked, and all those sorts of things. And it looked like he met the standard in terms of standing up and locking it out, but it was obvious it was coming out of his right hand, getting ready to fall out of his hand, and he beat the down command. And it was three. Yep. It was three That's reds, right. And it was pretty obvious. Yeah.
So he ends off with a 375 deadlift. His total is 1080. So his total came down a little bit, but obviously, like we said, had some issues on the bench press. Didn't come out for his third squat. So he did what he had to win and take his. I think this is his third world title now. He's got 2021. He's got 2022, and now he's got 2023. So these world titles starting to. Well, first off, where the flip does the time go? All right, but second off, Jesus Oliveras is a 3-time world champion. It's insane how quickly this is all, and he's a kid. He's still young. Mm-hmm. His potential in terms of how many world titles he might have and what he did at Sheffield and what he's going to do with the world record. I think I'm comfortable saying we're in the Jesus Oliveras era now. And Timur from Georgia, ending off, his total came down. He didn't have a great squat session, only got his opening squat in. Ended off with a 382.5 deadlift. So his total, he's usually over 1,000 kilos. His total came down, and Cenk Kochak had a good squat session, actually. 370 is a pretty good squats for him. Did not have the worst bench, ended off with a 240, and it was relatively smooth, but 370 for his deadlift, and then 390, his second deadlift. I thought he probably should have got that. They took it from him. It was whatever. I didn't overanalyze it and watch it. I'm just talking live. I didn't redo it a couple times over, but then 390 for a second time up. Definitely, I mean, he failed it on strength. He was very disappointed with himself in terms of his performance. His total also went down. He's usually over 1,000 kilos. We could have had a 1,000 kilo podium. with all three gentlemen wasn't to be. I think the pace might have ruined these fellas and made it very difficult. What are you thinking there, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, you touched you rounded the bases perfectly. I mean, I think what Jesus did was smart. He's in a class clearly all by himself. Very smart to pass on the third squat, given the pace. No need to take it. You're way out in front, but to treat the crowd to 1,003. And also, oh, by the way, let's not go after Ray Williams' world record. That serves us no purpose here. We don't need it. He can save that for Sheffield. So the world record is 477.5. And presumably now he can go home, he can chill, he can lick his wounds, whatever analogy you want to use, and just prep for Sheffield, where I would, then there's incentive for him to go after that world record at Sheffield. And yeah, I mean, he did the thing and secured his third title. And not a whole lot to say about the other two gentlemen. I had Sank or Kochak coming in second, and I just think his deadlift inconsistency kind of bit him again. And I think in order for him to kind of climb there, he just has to make more deadlifts. Like you said, he had a great squat session, made 2 benches, but just not able to come through in the deadlift. And so you're at this strength, you're giving up a lot of kilos taking those kind of jumps. And so with another 20, he's securely in second place. And we're talking about a silver medal around his neck. But yeah, so that was pretty much the story. Also, Ilyas Boulahem from Algeria, he's got the world record in the bench. He's kind of these, for lack of a better word, with these one-off benchers or a one-hit wonder, so to speak, in this weight class, but in a class all by himself. This was the first time in a while where he wasn't able to secure a world record in the bench at the World Championships. I remember actually having a lifter compete against him. This was 2014 in South Africa in Potchefstroom, and my lifter Matt Bauer, that's a blast from the past, was a light super competing. We doubled up in that weight class. We had Ray Williams and Matt Bauer, and I was coaching Matt and actually wrote his training at the time, and Matt took the gold medal. And that was when Ilyas was first coming on the scene, and I'd done my homework on this guy, and I was like, he's going to take himself out of it by taking a big jump, and he did, and Matt Bauer was able to secure the world record on that day. That being said, Ilyas Boulahem now in a class all by himself in this weight class in terms of IPF benching, but just wasn't able to secure a world record on this day. So I think that is kind of all I've got to say about the supers.
Yeah, he's a hell of a showman. He was flashing eight. And then we were like, what is 8? And then Joe Whiteley, who does open powerlifting as well, and also the commentary, looks and he goes, oh, he's 8 world records, 8 times at the World Championships broke the world record, which is a crazy streak. And he's like, we're going to go for 8 today. So I'm glad he loaded it up for the first time. He missed, but a new streak coming. He's got 8 gold medals in a row anyway. So let's keep that one going. See who could take the gold medal off his neck at the World Championships. Eric, what are you thinking, sir?
Yeah, very similar. I don't have a whole lot to add, but overall it was it seemed like it was a rough day for the supers. There were 3 lifters who took a shot on 400 kilo or higher squats besides obviously Jesus, and all 3 of them were not able to hit Timur, Abdul Rahman, and Sean Koch. And in fact, the silver medal went to a lifter in the B flight who I was commentating for, Mehdi Mafiolami from Iran, who actually set a M1 world record. That was the only record set in the entirety of the 120 plus, and it wasn't in the open. And that was a 387.5 kilo third squat, where, like I said, those other 3 gentlemen I mentioned were going for 400. 2 of them were doing that on their second attempt and retaking it on their third. And then one, Sean Koch, he did it on his, he jumped to 400 on his third and missed. So yeah, there was a little bit of probably an underperformance relative to what people were capable of based upon those squats. And I think in our preview show, we expected to have 2 or 3 individuals in the 1,000 kilo range, and we only had Jesus. So it was it's tough. I think we were talking about short flights, shorter rest periods. It's going to disproportionately affect people as they get heavier. So I think we saw a little bit of that there, and Jesus passed his third squat. So I think people were playing to the conditions of the field, if you will.
All right, I'd like to move on. Oh, by the way, you mentioned your commentary. I got a couple notes. I don't know they're they're directing it to King of Lifts, but they're like, hey, they're associating you with King of Lifts now. But to your detriment probably. But they were
Sure.
like, Eric's really good at commentary. And I'm like, I'll let him
Oh,
know.
thanks.
Yeah. They were like, hey, he's done very well on commentary. And they're messaging me at King of Lifts and not you, but maybe they're King of Lifts fans who are seeing you on the show or whatever. Maybe they think you're running King of Lifts, or I don't know. But there it is, sir.
I'll
Hats off
take
to
it.
you, sir. And we did a session together, and I would echo their sentiments. Some questions here, fellas, real quick. Who was the breakout star
I
of the
think it's
men's
hard not
of
to
the
not
men's?
personally.
Right?
I think it's hard not to say. Well, if the question is breakout star, it can't be Anatoly, and it also can't be Pana because they have won before. I think it has to be Cali, right? Who is come out on top of the dog pile with the best powerlifter, arguably, in the world, still competing right now. At his peak on formula. So, yeah, man, that's my vote.
Agreed, 100%.
I'm gonna agree. But I'm also gonna say a nice honorary mention would be Wasker. The only
Yeah,
reason why not Wasker is didn't have the battle and the sensational come from behind win, yada yada. So
Yep.
Callie's impression was definitely bigger felt, and it was Taylor for God's sake. But
Right.
Wasker an honorary mention, and
Yep.
let's see what happens. Maybe he goes against a goat next year if Fedo's back, or who knows. How about this one? Comeback of the year. Comeback of the year for or a comeback of the worlds for men.
Oof.
that's tough. So Keiko, it's he had bronze last time, but he won, but he just did so well at Sheffield that I have a tough time giving it to him. I sort of want to give it to Anatoly for the comeback against the war in Ukraine, even though
He also lost at
that's true.
Euros.
At Europeans, he struggled. So yeah, okay. You know what? I'm going to go with Anatoly for those two reasons. That he greatly improved from his European showing, and given everything that's going on in his region, I think it's awesome to see him have such a good performance at Worlds.
Yeah, I think it's to your point, Eric. I think it's a toss up in terms of comeback. I would say it's a toss up between Penna and Anatoly. And since you took Anatoly, I'll ride with Penna.
There you go.
World champion in 21, and then fifth place, in 22, and bombing out of Euros. And considering his story and the health of his father, God bless him, and all that he's been through on a personal level, to rise back up and to be, the 66 kilo king, I would give it to Penna as the comeback performance of the year. Yep.
I'm gonna pick Penna with Anatoly as an honorable mention.
I like that.
Either one of them could win, but the reason why Penna, I think, is because he fell off so much. I think people couldn't see his pathway back, whereas Anatoly, I think people thought he was coming back. But on the flip side, Anatoly's come back. I don't know what he's going to tell me on the interview, but I'm sure it's going to be very impressionable when he's come back from. Not to mention on the platform losing at Europeans and whatever. Like he's had some rough goes. So either one, there's no wrong answers with these gentlemen. Let's be honest.
Either one.
Yeah. Okay.
It's worth mentioning. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, if you wanted another honorable mention, you can go ahead before we move on.
No, we're good. You go ahead.
Okay. What performance changes how you feel about this era in their particular weight class? Have they impacted their era in that particular weight class? And if you want me to give an example, I'll go first.
Okay.
I think Penna's performance changed how you're going to feel about the era, because now in the last 3 years, Penna's won 2 world titles. And when you start thinking about the 66s now, previously, when he won 2021, 5th 2022, and if it continued along that slide, let's say he was nominated 4th, he stays 4th, and things just continued on. It is what it is, right? He's popular, he's all those things. The fact that he came back and won another title in the last 3 years, now he's 2 for 3. And he was so, even if not winning on 2022, his impact now Now, when we move forward, we have Sheffield. Now, when we move forward, if he wins even one more in terms of anyone who did something for their era in their weight class, that win is uber significant. In the last 2 years, the sport has leveled up with Sheffield, leveled up with Eurosport, leveled up with IPF World's coverage, and now he wins. It was a very timely win for him. If he didn't win a title after 2021, since 2021, we have grown as a sport so much. It's only been 2 years, but the leveling up that he won now is going to do a big deal towards his career moving forward and how we see him than if he never did. And I think in terms of an era, now, when you're talking about affecting the era, if you gentlemen want to pick somebody who only has one win, that's fine. Harder to say you're affecting over a time period where now Penna could be like, look at over a time period, I'm starting to affect. And if he wins one more after this, oh my gosh, we're talking 3 out of 4 years, he's won 3. Okay, wow. I think he's done a lot of work there. And again, I'm talking about the difference, how you felt about him leading into Worlds and how you think his resume and legacy now is after Worlds. So if it's already, look, if you tell me Jonathan Keiko, I'm going to tell you, well, you must have missed the last 3-4 years. He's, like, where were you? This convinced you? You must be hard convincing. But in terms of Penna, I think he's changed a lot of people's minds as an athlete, not as a coach, social media wise, but as an athlete. I think he changed a lot of people's minds, and people are like, okay, he's not a one-hit wonder who's popular. He will change your mind when you think about this era. I believe. Anyways, that's how I think. And a lot of people who might have dismissed him now, they're, nah, you can't. That's what people want to do when you get a little too popular. So anyways, I'm going to take Penna, and I might have just stole probably the number one choice in terms of changing how you feel about him, historically speaking, in his placement. Maybe I took it from you guys because I went first. What do you guys think?
I am actually going to go with Anatoly, even though this performance is not massively different than his 937 at Worlds. But I think because it's A, in the 105s, and B, in the era where the USAPL has split off, I think it might be the start of us going, hey, mid 900s is what it's going to take to be competitive in this class when everyone else comes over, if they come over. So this is me. It's a risky bet, because I think it might be the door opening to some incredible battles that we see in that weight class moving forward. The battle of the 105s historically has been fought at lower totals. I'm thinking of the two weight classes where in the men's side, we're not quite as like skyrocketing in terms of performance as we are compared to the women. Some classes are starting to level off. Like this wasn't that different in the 93s or the 83s, for example. 800 total or just below a 900 total. It's going to get you the same thing this year as it has in previous years. 74s, it's really just Taylor than everybody else knocking and crawling and scraping to try to get close to 800. But if you look at the 66s, we've got mind-blowingly people totaling over 700 now, and that probably becoming the standard to win, a number starting with 7. And now in the 105s, we have Anatoly, who's head and shoulders above everybody else. So I think those would be my two picks for a new era, especially if we see the USAPL stars come over and start to battle with Anatoly.
Matt, what do you think?
Man, this is such a tough question, and you guys stole some of my thunder.
Probably,
I don't. Let me look at it through just. I don't want to change your question, but through just a slightly different lens, and let's touch on Waskar just again for a second. I don't want to. I mean, look, this is his first World Championships. He came out, he showed and proved, and he won. He did the job. I think with Waskar, I mean, I don't think this is, look, it's premature to say this is Waskar's era. I mean, this is his first World Championships, and that's great. And hopefully he can come back and build on that. I think what Waskar just did with this performance is reframe the conversation and reframed what we now think is possible from people not named Sergey Fedosienko, right? because Sergio Fedosienko is such this ultimate outlier, or has been, in this weight class. And so now it's reshaping what we think is possible. And it's just, he's leveling up, and he's telling people, hey, come on, guys, because I'm moving. You know what I mean? I'm in the 620s here, mid 620s, and I've got the third best performance of all time. Well, come on, like, follow the leader. Like, I'm the leader now, since, Sergey has been out of the conversation. So again, not necessarily the start of an era, because this is just his first World Championships. I just think he's helping us rethink what is possible, in this weight class, which is exciting to see, because it's a weight class that a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, if you don't have a dog in the race, you just don't pay attention to it. And it's, it's because it's just, there's not as many 59 kilo guys walking around, but he's making people pay attention, and that's impactful.
I think, to be fair, the question wasn't necessarily even to give you a little bit of liberty with these questions, fellas. Not necessarily who's creating an era, but who's affecting this era.
Yeah,
with their performance. And you could say it's not his era, but he's affected how you feel about the 59s now. This era right now, and whatever happens, if moving forward, even if he doesn't win next year, you're going to watch next year now. Just like you watched this year, 59. It's like more, you were going to anyways. So I mean, the proverbial you. Wasker has affected how we look at the 59s, if temporarily right now. It's a good point.
Right. I mean, because no disrespect to any of the other 59s, but last year we had Leon Franklin didn't even post, right? He didn't even show up, right? He didn't show up at Worlds last year in South Africa. So we had Antoine Garcia win last year. Am I correct, Ryan?
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. So no disrespect to the rest of the 59s, but now Wasker comes in and makes a huge splash, right? And so he's putting this weight class back on the map now. And so it's in the conversation, and people are paying attention because he's got it all. And he's a polished lifter. He's got the charisma, and he does things the right way, and he's classy, and he's humble, and he executes at a high level. And so, yeah, I think he's put this class back on the map, and I think he's telling people, look, y'all better follow, because I'm heading into the mid 600s. So he's at 625 now. He's a deadlift away from being 637 and hitting the magic number for Sheffield. So, with more time under his belt, that total is going to grow.
Quick yes or no question, fellas. Are we in the Jesus Oliveira era?
Yes.
Yes.
Nicely done. Another quick question, yes or no. Is Kalle Johansson the new king, or is the battle still to be fought?
He's the current world champion.
Ooh, we're playing the word game right now, and I like it.
That's how I would frame it too. He's the current IPF World Champion for 2023.
All right.
Should we talk about team points?
Yeah,
let's talk about team points, and then we'll move, and then we'll conclude the show. Let's do it, man. You take it.
Yeah, I think this one was about as we expected. In first was America, and showing that with pretty far ahead, 57 team points, and then second and third. I think the only potential upset is I would say Great Britain had a very full team with a lot of hope, and I think overall as a team they probably didn't perform as well as they'd wish they had, and we talked about a few of those people. Jurens notably. So I would have actually expected Great Britain to be in second, but Great Britain fell to fourth actually by 1 point behind Sweden with 36 points. It was very tightly clustered. So France 39, Sweden 37, Great Britain 36. But you shake things up a different way. Great Britain performs a little better, and I think we would actually see Great Britain in second, which I think is it speaks to just how full of a team GB has and just how competitive things are getting. Sweden also historically very good team, very good coaches, very good men's team especially, and France probably a little more well known currently for the women's team, but showing that they actually do have a very robust team on the men's side as well. But I think we're going to see that kind of second, third, fourth in future years kind of bump around between these three European powerhouses.
Yeah, France had a lot of lifters, like obviously Penna won, collected 12 points there. They had a lot of lifters that finished off podium, but grabbed just off podium, grabbing points like Nicolas Perrault in the 105s, Coco Clement at fifth place Nicolas Perrault 120s, Coco in 105s. In the 93s, who do they got there? In the 83s, they got Yanis Buchu. In the 74, like in 74s, they got Rambo, and Antoine Garcia in the 59s. Like they had people that, if off podium, were just off podium collecting points consistently throughout. And then of course Penna giving them 12 points really helped out. So it's tough. Sweden's contenders, Great Britain's contenders, like you got contenders.
Yeah, and for those who don't know how team points work, you basically get the 1 through 10 inverse of your placing, so 1 point for 10th place, right? And then going all the way up, except second place, while it's 9, first place is 12, so they weight that gold medal probably as they should. And then they take the 5 highest placings on your team, and then if there is a tie to be broken, then they look at good lift points of those lifters. So so we expected the US to win. The US did win, but it is really tight between the 3 placings after that, maybe even 4. So let me look at that real quick. Actually, no, mainly 4. Spain did very well, but there was a good 10-point drop. But there's only 3 points separating second, third, and fourth: France, Sweden, and Great Britain.
And one final thing, Ryan, because I promised him that I would. We touched upon it at the start, but I'll touch upon it again. Just want to say congratulations to Kasper Maciejewski, who is from Poland, who is the KOTL Fantasy League winner. He took first place all by himself, and so just want to give him a shout out. Spoke with him on social media. He only had 2 weight classes that he picked incorrectly. He actually picked Kjell Backlund to win the 74s. So that was an interesting pick. And then he got Bonica. And then he got Bonica. He picked Bonica to win that one. So we're going to get into that with the women's show. But so shout out to Kasper. Congratulations, man, for winning the Fantasy League.
And we got to say, that's what I was going to say. I got to give him some props.
What's that?
Got to give you some props,
kind sir.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of people. I posted in my stories talking smack earlier in the week, so it was kind of fun making some stories. And I threw a little shade at Eric too, that he reposted in his. So I came in 5th overall. I was tied for 5th. So as the fantasy league shakes out, there are a lot of ties. So don't be disappointed if you're ranked 120th like Eric, because really it might be 80th.
Are you sure it wasn't 112?
That was such a well done diss. Matt Gary usually is not that guy, but that was so well done.
And let's it's all how you frame it, though, guys.
It's nothing but love, Eric. I love you.
I mean, I was in the top third of placings, which I think is the top tertile, And let's just say there were a lot of upsets in this year.
That's true. That's a fact.
But I'm pretty sure out of everyone in the preview show who participated, Matt was far and ahead of the I don't think Rory participate, or was it because he was running it and he didn't?
Yeah. Roy didn't participate, just so there wasn't a conflict of interest.
He was done very well.
So
that's fine.
But
it's fun.
Man.
It's
encourage people to keep playing, and everybody will be fighting for second next year, because I'm going to win the next one. So
okay,
top 5, man, is tough, man. Top 5, especially with upsets like that happen at Worlds, it's so difficult.
Yeah, I mean,
you get one upset, it changes everything.
So can I just say what that indicates, though? It indicates, because the way the points work for the fantasy league is you rank your confidence in the wins. So I actually didn't have that different of a predictions than Matt Gary did, but Matt Gary, he had a much better assessment of where should I place the highest probabilities. So I think that speaks to a more nuanced understanding.
You might have also just picked the wrong people. We're gonna spot you.
There was both.
That's what happened.
Well, the thing is Matt actually shared who he picked.
Yeah, I did. I shared my picks. So
it wasn't that different than mine. Like
Okay.
we missed different people, but like so for example, I got Keiko right, and he chose Gavin Aiden, but we both chose Taylor. But I probably lost more points on Taylor or something like that. So it's I think
that's the one. Sorry, go ahead.
He knew where to hedge his bets, is all I'm saying. And he knew where to push his chips forward.
That's what it is.
The maximum amount of points that you can score is 136 points. And so Casper scored 121. So that's out of a potential 136, because 136 would be the maximum score. And then, if we had a tie at the top, we would go to best lifter and teams and all that sort of thing. But Casper was in a class by himself at 121. So
I guess it's tough, huh? Well, it's sports, man. There's so many sessions. All right, fellas, let's conclude this. Everybody, please do give us high ratings. Post it up. What do you think about the recap show? As long as it's positive, I'll repost it. How do you like that? Until next time, 6-pack Lapadat, 6 up, and we are out.